The story begins with the fact that the protagonist more and more often began to see the same dream, in which he wakes up in another world, where there is no Japan as a state. To all other things, it feels like a real one, although it is a dream. There, he has a huge amount of diverse information and is also interested in games. The name of this mysterious game was Resistance Noah or Rhesus Noah. The protagonist of this RPG, Alexandra, commands an army of rebels. At first, it seemed that there is nothing difficult here. The main thing is to defeat the demon lord, but in the process, everything became insanely complicated, and even in the dream, the hero lost many times until he won. So, the protagonist hears the words of the protagonist, with which the game always began, that the rebels will execute the sacred judgment and avenge their homeland, and a beautiful girl named Alexandra Rodonit will make him pay for everything. And at this point, the main character began to realize that he was sitting on the throne, plus everything she said and the way she did it said that this was Alexandra, and she could lead an entire army. And this was a scene he had seen countless times in his dreams. What was happening now was an exact copy of the game dialogue. The man did not fully realize the essence of what was happening, because for him, it was a recurring dream. And suddenly he realized that he was none other than the demon lord, who was going to be killed right now by the girl with her sword, as she had already rushed to attack him. And his name is Menos Noah, and he's the last boss in Rhesus Noah. But as soon as he heard that name from Alexandra, he couldn't believe it was really him and addressed to him, and the girl already had her sword over his head. But at that minute, the guy started to realize that he had somehow magically become the last boss of this world, and now he was going to be assassinated. But he was too calm as he had seen this attack many times. Alex was now using Heavy Cut, a level 1 sword skill, but was too slow, so Menos was able to stop her attack with 2 fingers. So he decided to be a tough guy and told her not to try to jump above her head and threw her back in the direction of her soldiers who were standing off to the side. It was easy to block an attack when you know when and where to expect it from. When Alex found herself among her knights, they started questioning if she was all right and told her not to attack the enemy alone. The guy sitting on his throne thought that it would be much easier if she surrendered, but he realized that the girl would not do that. But at this moment, Menos just wanted to be alone and think about everything. And in general, he does not care about the rebel army. And everything happened very suddenly. So he was confused, and looking at Alex, he realized that she has both skills and equipment of level 5, the initial level. Menos also assumed that he was the last boss in this game, which is considered a game for masochists, where defeating him would be considered a huge event in a player's life, as he is the strongest boss of RPGs. He realized that it was impossible for today's Alex to overpower him, as he already knew the result of this attempted assassination of his, the death of the entire army, and the girl in particular. So the guy decided to banish them at any cost. For this, he began to summon the Golem of Night, which began to appear from his shadow on the floor. Looking at the army, Menos said that none of them had a chance to survive and win, and offered them to surrender. In the corridor just appeared a lot of monsters that with their numbers began to scare the soldiers. But that was the reaction the guy was counting on. But Alex decided to reject Menos's offer, because in her opinion, if she retreats, this world has no more chances and hope. Therefore, the demon lord began to attack already mages to defeat. So, Menos flew a first-level water spell, Water Squall, a first-level lightning spell, Lightning Squall, but it was obvious to him the difference in their power. Yes, different tactics had been prepared, but it made little difference. The guy realized that all these people were working hard to defend their country. It had to be said that Noah's empire that he was now ruling was surrounded on all sides, and they were being attacked every day by these people. But other than that, there were many internal conflicts as well. However, thanks to his ability to create a monster, Menos was able to unite the country by force and completely destroyed all enemies, subjugating them to his will. He concluded that Alex's home country was part of the ones he had subjugated, but he was doing all this to protect the empire, but it only led to more enemies. So now there was a coup d'etat going on. The guy remembered his dream, where the ministers of the empire were in league with the rebel army, and Alex had let the prime minister into his chambers, and the soldiers of the empire pretended not to notice them. So what happened in the game probably happened in this world as well. At this point, the man realized that he was betrayed not today, But long ago, too long ago, so the protagonist of the game began to hate humanity. Manos was betrayed and killed by the people he was trying to protect, so the man clutched at his heart after this discovery. Alex thought her strategy and her men's attacks had worked, so she ordered not to stop. But it wasn't quite like that. The physical damage was almost non-existent, but psychologically it hurt him to look at it all. Even so, they couldn't beat him. But if it was like the game, Alex would attack him until he killed him, and she will attack him again and again until she finishes him off with her own hands, as the final boss must die by the protagonist's hand. After that, he thought that if he killed her first here and now, he might have a chance to avoid death. The girl sensed the change in him and became frightened. The guy realized that killing her would be the easiest thing to do, and it would give him a chance to move on with his life in peace and safety. But he stopped and began to think, yes, he can kill her, but it will not change anything, as there will be new heroes and peace is not expected. And besides, the main boss is a creature whose death will want to everyone. So he could not decide what to do. And so he came up with one interesting option, because if it goes on like this, no one will be happy and there will be no one left to protect. In such a case, to finish a happy ending for everyone, he still needs to die. The girl was puzzled by his reactions and behavior. But then Manos began to cast his sorcery. He used a third-level darkness magic, Shadow Mist. The girl called the smokescreen a very dirty trick. The girl rushed forward with words that he could not escape from her. She spotted him and struck, her sword piercing his body in the heart area. Alexandra mercilessly drew her sword from him, and blood began to flow. Manos couldn't believe this was his end, but continued to choke on the blood. The guy fell to the floor and began to bleed. The soldiers asking if they had won. The girl herself asking herself and others if he was dead. Alexandra then took Manos's place and began to confidently say that he had fallen at her hands. The rebel army had won. All the warriors rejoiced at this event because they believed they had saved the world. But in fact, it wasn't like that. Manos was alive, and Alex killed a doll that was an exact copy of him, and in the smoke he substituted himself with her, and then used invisibility magic hiding himself and his magical wolf. Manos realized that he had managed to fool everyone. But at the same time, Alex did not look happy. At that moment, he took off his mask, deciding that Emperor Manos was gone from now on. From that day forward, he decided to just be Manos, not Emperor. Next, he turned to his magical animal Gracia Raboris and ordered him to go from here to there. The young man, after all these events, went to a clothing store and began to try on different variants, which sat on him perfectly. Looking in the mirror, he realized that the disguise had been successful. The guy realized that he was not only strong, but also handsome, and any outfit suited him perfectly. But nevertheless, he didn't want to attract much attention, so he decided to choose a more modest outfit. Manos decided to take only a cloak, the price of which was 1,000 strong. The man had never made purchases on his own before, so he did not know the value of currency, and all finances were handled by officials. He put a bag of gold on the counter, but misunderstanding the reaction of the saleswoman, he doubled the amount. The girl began to explain to him that it was on the contrary too much, as one large gold coin could buy 10 sets of clothes. The guy took the sack and asked to give him clothes for 1 gold coin. The salesgirl packed everything, but Manos didn't want to carry the bales, so he ordered the shadow hands to take them away. At that moment, his hands took his bales into a black hole in the floor. They are often used to pull people into the shadow world, but he decided to use them to store things as it was quite convenient. The girls didn't understand where the goods had gone, but he told them that he had hidden them in the shadow world. It was the first purchase in his life, so he took a lot of things. Leaving the store, he fastened the brooch on his cloak and walked towards the market square, where it was full of people having fun. He was in the imperial capital, Gothel, which was just an ordinary town next to the castle. The square was crowded, and it was strange for him to feel part of what was going on, but it was depressing for the guy that people were cheering his death so much. But he realized that he had given up the title of last boss to live free, so the guy made a decision to enjoy life. And first on that path was a strawberry pancake at the deli. Manos had never tried stall food before that day. He liked these strawberry pancakes so much he wanted to buy 100 of them, putting a bag of gold on the counter. The guy made his second big purchase of the day and thought he should have stopped being a rascal earlier. At that moment, he decided to treat his magical pet, who also liked the pancake, to a pancake, and the shopkeeper was shocked to see the food dissolve into thin air. Menos couldn't eat all the pancakes he bought, so he gave some of them to the seller, and then there was some commotion. It turned out that the heroes who had defeated the demon lord had arrived. Everyone praised and lauded the heroes of the rebel army who defeated the emperor. But the guy realized that originally all of them died except Alex. But it is seen that because of his death, the story changed a lot. The main character, Alex, was riding in the most beautiful carriage. She was being thanked, she was being applauded, she was smiling, and that smile attracted people. But then Alex and Menos's eyes met. Menos thought the girl should be happy, but at the bottom of her eyes he saw sadness. But he decided it was not his concern and decided to go his own way. Suddenly, he noticed an assassin who was hiding on the clock tower. Apparently, he wanted to kill Alex. Menos realized that most likely it was all conspiracies of other countries to overthrow the empire. The problem turned out to be that, apart from Menos, no one had spotted the killer, neither Alex nor the other soldiers, so he had to take matters into his own hands. Menos saw the light of the magic circle and realized that the assassin was using sniper magic, which was most likely level 15, which meant that if he hit the girl, she would die. So he didn't think long, jumped on the wagon, pushed the girl away, who started to resent it. The sniper was already using his magic. The sniper's magic was quite powerful, but Menos stopped it by using his own already, thus protecting Alex while hiding his face behind his hood. Before rushing into battle, Menos prepared himself, but the assassin was weak, as the damage from his attack was 0. And anyway, how could someone like that get into the happy ending created by the guy? He was starting to get angry as this trash decided to disregard his decision not to kill Alex and trust her with his empire. But there was a little mistake here, as he accidentally released his lust for killing and some soldiers died. But he only meant to do a game over for the man on the roof. And this whole action turned into a serious event, but he gave up the role of the main boss for freedom, so he will destroy everything that gets in his way. So he told his magical animal that it's time to eat. The wolf spread its huge arms and flew up into the sky. The murderer thought it was just the wind, but it was the wolf, which opened its mouth and flew towards him. The man on the roof was shocked by what was happening and couldn't understand what it was. Menos realized that he was done with this man, but he needed to get out of here as well. But he was called out by a girl asking him what was going on there. Alex was finally able to straighten up, leaning on the side of the wagon with one hand, and looked up at Gala Menosu, asking the man who he was. Looking at the girl, Menos realized that she was weak, inexperienced, and could not be relied on. In addition, her strength was entry-level. She had no comrades either, and she was a psychologically immature person. At this point in the game, Alex was supposed to be the new empress, but this girl was just going to be killed. Menos started to approach her. One of the soldiers shouted at him to stay away from their mistress, and Alexandra herself took up her sword. But Menos decided to be charming and cool. He walked over to the girl, put his arm around her shoulders, smiled, and asked her to try harder. She looked at him with wide-open eyes, and he realized that this girl, though weak, though unreliable, but nevertheless, she was worthy of becoming the new empress. At this point, the guy began to realize that the girl is different from him in that she is kind, has a sense of justice, can lead people. And he, no matter how hard he tries, brings only fear, and so the country is not to protect. Menos then pushed the girl, about to disappear. She wanted to talk to him, and her men thought he was a murderer and a suspect who couldn't leave. But he took little notice of this, stood before the soldiers and menacingly ordered them to show him due respect. Even if the soldiers didn't want to do it, they bent one knee in front of the guy, and he used his magic and disappeared right in front of their eyes. The soldiers jumped up and decided to look for him. But the guy at the time was high in the sky, picked up by his favorite pet. He sat on the animal's back, thinking that Alex would be okay. Menos was now leaving his homeland, yet he felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He felt freedom deep in his heart, and so he flew with his faithful Glacia toward the woods and fields, away from the city and the hustle and bustle. Glacia was happy too. Thus ends the story of the heroine Alex, and his is just beginning. He does not know what awaits him in the future, but whatever it is, and he is going to live in his own pleasure. So Menos on Glacia flew into the forest and landed in a clearing. As expected from an S-rank monster, she was able to travel such a long distance using the invisibility skill. For this, the guy thanked the beast and scratched near its neck. He has arrived not just in the forest, but in the Devil District, a man-eating forest in the northern part of the Empire. A large number of monsters live there, and he has views on them. Namely, Menos decided to live a quiet life here with them, because he ascended the throne at the age of 10, constantly working and studying, as well as being wary of assassins, so he wanted to live a quiet life all his life. It must be said that people rarely come close to this place, so he chose it to live his second quiet life. And the first thing he did was to create a base for them to live in, with the help of darkness magic, the gravity spell. So, gravity interrupts the movement of all opponents, and until the next move reduces their speed by half. Also, with its help, you can level the territory. Besides, on the floor got a beautiful pattern of colors pressed into them. But besides that, he needs a home, and the magic of creating demons came into play. He had a book in his hands, where all the monsters were collected. Those he destroyed and those he created. So he began to create Mimicdom. Mimic House is also a monster, rank C. It devours people, lost people. But the interesting thing was that there was furniture inside. This surprised Menos. But the problem was that there was very little space inside, and he wanted to live comfortably rather than settle for the bare essentials. So he decided to reinforce the house. You have to remember that there are 2 stages to the monster creation process. Creation, creating monsters from nothing. Merging, creating a new monster by merging. So if you merge 2 created mimic houses, you will get one, but much better one. After that, the guy noticed that the fusion was successful, and the new monster house became rank B. This house became much more spacious and comfortable to live in. Next, Menos continued the process of sorcery. He created a tea trent and a sweet hat, and from each he took a piece of each, so he ended up with a magical tea leaf and a sweet spore. And finally, he mixed everything together. When the lad had mixed it all up, it turned out to be tea. He sat down in a soft chair and began to savor it, while the wolf lay beside him and gnawed on a bone. Menos had always dreamed of having such a calm and measured thing, and yet doing nothing. He drank 1 cup, sat, drank another, and sat again. But the problem was that he got bored, as it was very different from what he had imagined. After being free, Menos didn't know what to do. He thought of different options, like killing people or going to the 7 demon queens. He was saddened because it wasn't supposed to be like that. Everyone told him that a peaceful life would be interesting, but he felt extremely lonely and started talking to himself. The guy abruptly stood up and decided he was going to make a change and live a fun life. So the first day of peace came, and Menos scrambled and went with his loyal Galicia to an unknown destination. And they came to the nearest town, changed his name to Madi Rusty, and in the town they walked into the center where the Adventurers Guild was based, where a pleasant woman began the process of registering them with the guild. He was in the guild because being an adventurer is much more interesting than living in the middle of nowhere and doing nothing. That way he could visit interesting places or have a battle with some monster. The girl read out his profile and asked him if it was true. He said yes, and even brought a monster with him. After that, she secretly told the guy that he had a very unfortunate profession, or rather useless. But the guy disagreed, saying that even among the tamers there are masters, for example, Emperor Menos. The girl objected that the emperor was like a monster himself. The girl continued and added that tamers are not well received as they are similar to Menos, and consider meeting them a bad omen. After registering, the boy was assigned rank G. But he was not forbidden to go into the forest, and it was advisable to team up with someone who had rank E. After that, Menos asked if he could go on missions alone, but the instructor said that no. Beginners are recommended to go with experienced adventurers, and recommended him a group of 3 sisters instructors. They just like beginners. But he refused, as in his opinion, these girls are weak in their own, special skills they do not have. Meanwhile, Menos was beginning to think that if he was going to team up with someone, it would be someone who could really teach him something new. But this was a town of budding adventurers. And then he saw a girl with other people whispering behind her back. And then the girl turned around, stepping away from the task board, and turned to him. Menos shrieked. It was a beautiful elven girl, and not just any elf girl, but Mikorin. He even poked his finger at her out of surprise. The guy even started jumping and running around her, and everyone asked who he was. At the same time, the guy started to remember the details of the game. She was one of the main heroines there too. Her talent was revealed towards the end of the game, and her versatile skill change of equipment gives you the ability to fight Be Here, one of the strongest heroines in the game. But now he's here and he couldn't believe that this was the moment he met the girl. So he grabbed the girl's hand and confidently said that he and Mikorin would go on the case. The girl asked what he was doing and that she wouldn't go anywhere with him. The girl, on the other hand, asked him not to call her cute and not a weird name. This is when the receptionist decided to stop him. She asked him what he was doing since Mikol was a rank C veteran and asked him not to be rude to her. After that, Menos questioned the girls about being level 10 and already a veteran, and then Mikole spoke. She said, based on Anna's words, that she needed to get stronger so she didn't have time to deal with the newcomers. But Menos did not heed the girls' requests. He put his finger to the girl's lips, saying that this dialogue was too long. At this point, he asked again what the girl's name was. Anna confirmed the elven girl's name. But the guy could not agree with this information and began to voice another name. But at half a word, the girl interrupted him and agreed to go with him on the case. After that, Miko decided to join forces with Menos. Thus began the first day of the adventurer's life together with Mikorin. They ended up going on a mission together, and on the way, Miko starts saying that they haven't officially become a team, and after the rookie's internship, their roads will part. He didn't realize where they were going, and they walked into a forest that devours people. When they were in the woods, the girl turned around and put her staff to his throat. She needed to know how he knew her real name. The Minos monster started growling, and the guy didn't really want to talk about it as she wouldn't believe the truth. But Miko couldn't settle down and started to make him tell him all the information he knew about her. Menos thought she was a very capricious princess. So he began his story by telling her real name, Mikorin Pinkheart. She turned out to be the only princess of the country of elves. But because of the king of dragons quarreled with her mother and is on the run, the girl thought that he was sent by her mother. But Menos did not listen to her and gave out more and more information. Age 16 years, element light, skill change of equipment, she likes her mother and flowers. After hearing all that, the girl stopped him, and Menos thought that he had made a mistake somewhere. But the strange thing was that he knew even her proportions and weight. The guy replied that this information was available in the guide, but there were more interesting facts, such as the plan to create the World Flower Garden. But even after hearing that, the girl wasn't going to go home even if he dragged her there by force. But the guy wasn't going to do that. Then Miko asked about his purpose, but he didn't have a purpose. He just wanted an adventure. At that moment, Menos plucked a flower and put it instead of a hairpin in Miko's hair, saying that he wanted to get lessons from the newcomer and wanted to rely on her in this matter, to which the girl, embarrassed, gave her consent. After that, Miko decided to be serious, and Menos already wanted to look at her abilities and then started stroking his pet. They were walking through the woods, and Menos was eager to fight. But it turned out that this order was to collect herbs. But even if it was a killing mission, she would want to avoid unnecessary battles, since it's the basics, and she's not going to attack everyone, since it's stupid. Besides, if you do that, you'll get tired rather than victorious. That's why it's best to hunt a single target once every few days. And now the guy was excited about leveling up, which Miko didn't know anything about, and thought it depended on the training and skill of the person. And she didn't understand anything about sharing the experience between the participants of the battle. Yes, Menos realized that you could raise the level by training, but you would get less points for it than for killing a monster. But Miko stood her ground, saying that it was better to avoid monsters. Then the girl asked about the little monster of the guy, and the guy asked her not to underestimate his glacia, as it can also give a paw to the paw. They were all walking through the forest, and the girl asked Menos to be serious, as they would soon reach the medicinal herbs. This time, they had to get motzi, a white flower that grows in well-brightened places, and so they reached the right place. They got there, but it turned out to be the place where Menos had set up his marvelous monster house, the appearance of which had shocked Miko. Looking at the house, Mikorin resented it, calling it ugly and not understanding how it had gotten here. since it hadn't been there yesterday. Of course it wasn't, since Menos had built it recently. Menos never expected his mansion for a peaceful and free life in the middle of nowhere to be discovered so quickly, and even called ugly. Now Menos realized that perhaps he had chosen a bad location of the house. And about the flowers, he thought that they were weeds, so he thoughtlessly destroyed them. The guy noticed that the girl began to feel bad. The reason for this was dense miasmas, and they all came from his house. At this time, Miko began to ponder. She realized that an ordinary monster couldn't do such a thing, so this house belongs to someone very powerful. When Menos was relaxing alone, he released a huge amount of miasma, and then Miko came to the conclusion that it was someone from the 7 demon kings who did it. The appearance of this house, Miko considered an unusual event that could not have happened without the intervention of the demon kings. Besides, each of them has the strength to single-handedly destroy the country, and their supposed rank is higher B, but here she was wrong, as the rank of each king was SS. But Miko started to object, saying that there was no such rank. But Menos stood his ground and said that after A comes S and after SS, but he doesn't know why that is so. But it didn't matter to the girl, as it caused danger to the city anyway. Miko further concluded that since Menos was killed, his demons decided to attack the country, or even they want to destroy all of humanity. After reflection, Miko decided to report the house and kings to the guild, so his internship is suspended. But a monster tree decided to attack them from behind. This monster turned out to be a huge trent created by Minos for the purpose of drinking tea, and now towered over them. Menos took the girl in his arms and bounced. He understood. If the trent attacked his creator, it means he went crazy, and the same thing is probably happening with the mushroom. And it was just about this fungus, as its spore vapors cause insanity and aggressive behavior in other monsters that start attacking people. Menos did not want to deal with the monster, but he decided to do the elf a favor and finish it. But the girl was against it, because it was a monster of C rank, and also a trent. But for a guy, it was a small thing. The girl started to say that to fight such a monster, you need level 20 people, but there are not many of them in the world, which made the guy think. He realized that Miko was a talented practitioner and a C-rank veteran. Until now, he had assumed that the people of this world had low levels, but that was his mistake. After all, the level of people here is even lower than he thought, because people here do not hunt monsters, so they do not know how to raise the level. And in front of him, he saw a picture. There were many people on the ground, and monsters were climbing on them. This was because monster attacks were rare for humans. And if you remember, Alex was only level 5, and her soldiers were from 5 to 10. His thoughts were interrupted by Miko, who turned to him. At this point, Miko decided to hold off Trent and the group of plants with her magic. And the guy has to run away since they both haven't reached level 20, and they can't win this battle. But the boy was not going to run away, even though the elf insisted on it. She assured him that as soon as the opportunity arose, she too would run away. Besides, the Trent, though strong, was slow. Her hands were trembling, and Menos, who was now Mati, noticed this, so he said that she didn't have to do it for him. But the girl stood her ground, saying that it was her decision to team up with him, so she would protect him, and began to conjure, which surprised the guy. A pentagram appeared in the sky. It was second-level light magic, and the spell was Wall of Light, but it was starting to crack due to the root arm of the Trenta. As a result, her Wall of Light could not withstand the onslaught of the Trent and split apart. And the girl realized that the difference in strength between them was huge. It was Menos' turn to defend Miko. He intercepted the girl with one hand and stopped the Trent's attack with the other, saying that he shouldn't be in a hurry to die. This all shocked Miko. Menos realized that there were too many people like Alex in this world, but such a persistent character wasn't so bad. Miko asked how he was able to stop the monster with one hand and why he didn't run away in the first place. Next, the guy let her hold his pet and apologized for intervening when she decided to fight. But in his character settings, the run command doesn't exist, and running away equals losing to him. Menos approached Trent and told him that the bad kid who attacked his creator, so he will die by his hand. Besides, the last boss can only lose to the main character. At that moment, the Trent decided to attack again. The Elfess screamed and Menos stood motionless, about to start casting sorcery, activating restriction removal. He used the Eye of Stasis, and the monster stopped abruptly. The girl couldn't believe what she was seeing, and Menos explained to her that he had stopped the time Trent time. This skill he got from the snake, which was called Clock Snake, and allowed to stop the movements of the enemy for 60 seconds. But not only that he could do, because using the skill of creating monsters, he combined his body with a lot of monsters, and to keep the appearance of a man, used the skill of seals. But if you take it off for a while, you can use the power of monsters. In addition, if the seal was completely broken, it would enter the second phase. But such a monster was not worth such an expenditure of energy and strength. Then he summoned another skill to end the Trent, and that skill was the Scythe of Death. The Death Scythe skill he got from the Shinigami, when it enters the body of any creature, it takes its life instantly. So when an object is immobilized, it's a win-win option. Therefore, it is game over for the monster, as this single attack will bring instant death to it. With his scythe, Menos cut the Trent into 2 pieces. Miko, on the other hand, didn't understand what kind of skill it was that helped him kill a C-rank monster with a single strike. In the meantime, the Elfess was being attacked by small onion monsters, which Menos ordered Glacia to destroy, and with a joyful woof, she rushed to do so. She took her real form and took down all the mini monsters with one paw, for which Menos praised her and promised to pet her. Miko started asking a lot of questions, from why they were so strong to why the puppy was so huge. Only now did Menos realize that he had overdone it, though he kept his strength in check. But suddenly they both noticed something ominous. Something strange began to happen to the forest. Even the monsters began to scatter, and the most nearly blown away by a gust of wind. It wasn't just wind, but a strong magical wave that made Moko faint. But Menos held her up, preventing her from falling to the ground. It was a good thing, because otherwise she might have gone insane from the force. Something incredible was approaching them. As it sensed his magical power, he made the decision to leave as he was responsible for Miko's life. But he only had time to think about it and not do it, as this something began to take its shape in front of him, twisting into a pyramid of vines in a spiraling pattern. From this pyramid cocoon came a demon of interesting appearance, who said he was not mistaken. And the demon emperor was in this forest after all. He came fully out of his cocoon, ducked one knee and bowed his head, welcoming Menos to this forest. And yes, the boy realized who was in front of him. It was one of the demon kings. He was patrolling the territory entrusted to him and felt the power of his master and rushed to greet him. Menos thanked him, but realized that this was the worst option possible. Yeah, the guy didn't want to be discovered at this stage, but what is. And the 5th demon king, the tree king Jufil, did it. His race is World Trent. He was in charge of forest protection in the Empire and was the lord of plant-type monsters. His appearance depends on the will of the land, has the highest rank in this world. So, demons started to ask Menos about what he was doing in a place like this, and with a man, what he was up to, and the guy thought that the situation was worse than ever. After all, Demon misunderstood him, thinking that he decided to have fun with the girl in private. He started to deny it, but Yufil said that he understood everything perfectly well as it was. Yufil has decided that Menos will sort out the right creatures, or flush out the brood of humans, and he, as his faithful servant, is ready to turn several cities into a forest. And Menos realized that Yufil adored him too much, and he had no purpose right now, since he wasn't working. The guy needed to come up with a reason why he was in the forest, since the demon could really start turning cities into forests because of misunderstandings. And he decided to tell the truth. That is, that he had ceased to be emperor. But Yufil didn't understand why this had happened. He had worked so hard for the empire after all. So Menos started telling his creature that he was attacked by a rebel army and he decided to let them run the empire. But it turned out that Yufil hadn't heard about all of this. This information made the demon furious, as he realized that if it wasn't for Menos, this country would have fallen long ago. So he had the desire to wipe people off the face of the earth. At this point, Menos realized that things were bad. It turned out that Yufil, although he was the 5th strongest of the 7 demons, but he was the only one of them that could destroy humanity, as he could dry up people's crops. And the people here were low level and wouldn't be able to resist it all. As Yufil began to dry up all around him, Menos tried to calm and convince the demon that it was his decision, that he himself wanted to change jobs because he was tired. But Euphil didn't hear him and continued on. The demon did all this not because he hated humans, but because he loved his creator and master too much. But there was no way out. The demon couldn't hear his master, so he had no choice but to give a direct order. He ordered Euphil to stop. Menos went towards the king of plants and told him not to make a mistake. Noah's empire was his. And still is, even though he has decided not to rule anymore, and human uprisings will happen all the time, so he has decided to give a damn about it and advises him, Euphil, to do the same. Although the demon didn't understand and didn't want to accept what he heard, but since his master wanted it that way, he decided to return all the plants to their previous state. Although Euphil listened to Menos, but still muttered, because humans are stupid and do not understand the generosity of his lord. But the demon was curious about what the man will do next, to which Menos replied that he just wants to live freely for starters. Suddenly, Menos asked Demon about the border security. He replied that everything was going according to plan, and his subordinates were guarding the territory entrusted to them, but maybe the guy wanted to make some changes. Menos realized at that moment that if he removed the 7 demon kings from guarding the border, the country would fall, and all his suffering would be for nothing. Menos also realized that if anyone found out that the empire was being defended by demons, Alex would fall just like him. So he ordered Jufel and the other demon kings to continue defending the empire in secret so that no one would know about it. Euphil, although had some internal resistance, but respects the decision of his master and will do his bidding. But it was necessary to pass the information to other demonic kings. To this, demon suggested using the 4th King Primo as a messenger. Not a king, but a destruction queen Primo, who has no problem destroying various things. Plus, if you use her skill, Menos will have the ability to contact other kings. This skill, with the 4th at the center, helped create a network to share information to protect the country between all the kings. And then Menos felt abandoned, as he was not accepted into this network for communication. The demon then added that if anything or anyone appeared that would prevent Menos from being free, let it appeal to him through the link to the 4th, and he would destroy and drain everyone and everything. Next, he approached his master and asked him how he had the idea of ruling the whole world from the shadows and doing whatever he wanted for his pleasure and freedom. And that's what Menos started to think about. Then Miko started to give signs of life, and he realized that it was probably time for her to wake up. But he didn't know how to explain this situation. But Miko wasn't awake yet. But she was talking in her sleep. She was dreaming about the Trent. So the guy said the demon was dead, and for her to sleep peacefully onward while he destroyed all traces of it. Menos looked at the girl and turned to his creature. He realized that running the world from the shadows was a very good and interesting idea. Menos pondered on the fact that, yes, he was no longer emperor. So the history of this country had changed a lot, and anything could happen, such as humans losing to monsters. So, in order to keep things from sliding to a bad end, he decided to rule the world from the shadows in order to change not only his fate, but also the fate of the world. Menos considered Euphil's idea an interesting game, which pleased the 5th king, and the boy decided on the course of action for himself. Now it was necessary to clean up the clearing before Miko woke up. So he grabbed the fungus monster that releases spores, and suddenly Menos thought of an interesting thing and turned to Euphil. Menos continued to hold the mushroom in his hands, looking straight into Demon's eyes, and asked him if he could create the Molu herb. It was easy for the Demon King, so a sea of beautiful white flowers appeared in the clearing, which were then picked by Menos and Miko and brought to the guild, where Anna noted that the quality of the grass was very high this year. This was the first time Anna had seen such a thing. For each plant to be of the highest level and quality, Miko agreed with her, but she even thought they were artificially created, as they were neither bitten by insects nor trampled by monsters. Another oddity was one sweet argument. Other than that nothing, Anna asked Mari Menos if he too had seen anything similar or strange. He agreed with Miko that he hadn't seen anything either, for he tried his best to make sure that the other adventurers would not find out about it and look askew at him. So Menos hid his house with his magic and left everything else as hallucinations and grew the grass for his master Euphil. He also corrected the miasma in the air, brought the ground back to its original position, and when Miko woke up, everything was in its place. but it seemed to the girl that there was one more thing to do. But at the same time, Miko looked at the guy and thought he was suspicious, since she was the only one who was under the influence of the sweet spore, and he was chipper at the same time. The girl had a feeling that even in the hallucination he was still acting. Plus, with all that, he looked cool. After that, the girl got embarrassed and started to say that he was like that only in a hallucination. But in life, he was not like that at all. The girl wanted to hit him, but he kept dodging and talking about how great he was. But then soldiers came running into the guild to report that an invasion had begun in the Noah Empire from the west and the kingdom of Sneal. Miko was worried, since their borders were so close. But Manos was completely calm again. Anna began to explain the situation. Manos was protecting the state, and the borders were guarded by his demons, and since the emperor is dead on the empire decided to attack. But although now there is another emperor, but he will be delayed in the capital, and formatting the guards and the army will take time. But it didn't seem to be a problem for Manos because the borders continue to be guarded by 7 demon kings. But Miko's worries are understandable since in the original version of the game, no one could attack the empire due to the fact that trade and alliance treaties are lined up. The change in history seems to have happened here as well, because only because of his power the balance with other countries was maintained. But since the emperor is dead, war is a logically formed event. But if a global war starts, his second life will end. Here, Manos realized that it was quite difficult to live a quiet and free life. So he would have to rule the world from the shadows right now. Manos remembered Euphiel's words. The demon had remarked that the news of the Lord's abdication was too sudden for him. But the expression on Manos's face on the throne was different from what he saw now. Manos decided to take the situation into his own hands. He asked Anna where the army of the snail state could be now. The woman replied that it was most likely on the Sokonashi plain. And that was perfect. As this area was guarded by Primo, Miko planned to help the people of the city and then run away. But that was not the case, as Manos decided to get out for a while and walk to the Sokonashi plain, but the elfess tried to stop him as she didn't understand it from the word at all. At this time, the first battles with the enemy army began to take place on the plains. General Vagan, who commanded the army of the Noah Empire, stood out and understood the immense strength of the enemy troops. Discipline, a number much higher than their army, therefore caused despair in him. The general could not believe that a small state like Snail could have such an army. The general realized that most of the soldiers were level 5, but there were also those who had reached level 10. But the main thing was that such an army couldn't be assembled in a few days. The conclusion was self-evident, and the Revolutionary Army had a spy who was passing information to the Snail Kingdom about the current situation, so they began preparations in advance. The Noah Empire was attacking, and these attacks were level 3, so the magical wall was about to collapse under this onslaught, and the mages would soon be unable to hold it up. Vagan had no options left to maneuver, so he asked his soldiers to pass the information to the vice-general to retreat and fortify the capital, and from will become a bait for the enemies. He ordered his soldiers to flee, and himself rushed forward into the opening of the fallen barrier, for he could think of no better plan than that. Moving forward, Vaughn reflected on the fact that he was level 21. If only talking about that, he was superior to many. But he also realized that he couldn't hold back such an army alone for long, so he prayed to the universe for some miraculous help. And the moment arrows flew at him from all sides, he remembered Emperor Manos and his demons. The general paid tribute to Manos' strength, realizing that he would have dealt with his enemies quickly, as he was the strongest emperor in history. But the general's soldiers did not abandon him, but decided to follow him to the end, because if there were more of them, they could gain more time, and if the general decided to give his life for them, they would give theirs for the general as well. The general thought them fools, but if they too wanted to die, let them follow him into the attack, defending their frontiers. He realized that he could not rely on a dead emperor, but he needed to do his best to protect what he held dear. So General Vagan raised his sword and used his provocation skill, Battle Cry. Some of the enemies were defeated. After that, all arrows and attention was on this small group of Noah Empire soldiers, while the rest of the troops had to regroup and reinforce Alexandra's army. The main goal of Vaughn and his soldiers was to buy some time, and it didn't matter if it was a minute or a second. At this point, Menos came to the battlefield and began to cast his sorcery. He summoned 8th level darkness magic using the spell Nullify Magic. Everyone noticed that they couldn't use magic, both the enemies and the general. But at the same time, everyone noticed a silhouette in the sky. That silhouette in a black hooded cloak that hid his face descended to the ground, causing everyone present to gasp in shock. The enemies couldn't realize who it was that appeared in front of them, but they had orders to destroy everyone. But Menos had other plans and started using the skill of removing restrictions. So, a magic circle appeared in the sky. The general realized that it was real, but on the other hand, such a thing could not be, as such a thing was only found in myths. The guy in the cloak started using now 10th level earth magic, specifically the earth press spell. What began to happen is hard to describe. The earth came alive. Something like an earthquake started. Horses and people began to die under the embers of the earth. Rocks, dust flew around but in no way hit the cloaked figure. General Vaughn could not believe his eyes. The enemy army was defeated. A huge crack in the ground was formed, and the general realized that it was all created by a guy with a single spell. The man realized that he knew and considered possible magic only of the 5th level, but here is the 10th, which is impossible. And all the actions of the man in the hood, similar to the actions of a god. So he mistook Menos for a real god. And the fellow himself rejoiced in the work done and thought that now everything was ready. As Menos floated Glacia in the air, he asked her if she liked her portrait, as he applied the spell in such a way as to produce an image of her muzzle. Now, enemies could not cross this masterpiece of art. Now Menos planned to meet with Primo, and General Vaughn had received a medal and was being praised by all as the man who had stopped the enemy army with 4 of his soldiers. Menos began to look for his demoness Primo, but there were no landmarks, making the process difficult. He took stock of the fact that the plains of Sokanashi had always been vast, but 10 years ago there had been a country here too. But by Queen Primo's force, everything here was destroyed, and the surviving wreckage of buildings now look as if they have been swallowed up by the earth. To find the queen, Menos decided to use the sense of magic skill. But it didn't work since she has no magic, though her power of destruction is great. But then Glacia caught sight of something ahead. It was the soldiers, and opposite them stood a girl in a beautiful dress. They mistook her for a child. She had a mouthpiece in her hand and was asking the soldiers to move to the inner border of the country as it was dangerous here. But they kept aiming at her and didn't listen to what she was saying. The soldiers began to attack her and thought their target had been destroyed, at which time Menos circled above them on his pet Menos. Menos, on the other hand, realized that it wasn't that simple. Yes, Primo looked like a normal girl, but after a few seconds, she got up from the ground and asked her attackers why they were so cruel. If we talk about Primo, her species is proto-slime, and among slimes, she has the highest class. Queen, in this world, slimes are the progenitors of all other creatures, and their bodies can take any shape they want. So the girl happily told the soldiers that she was resurrected. Yes, the soldiers realized that she was a monster, but so Primo was alone, decided to attack her, and no one listened to her warnings. At that moment, the girl's body began to change. Her arms turned into the likeness of blades, and tentacles began to grow on her back. The soldiers rushed to the attack, and Primo, as if weightlessly dancing, began to utterly destroy the men, in place of horses and ammunition. The soldiers didn't understand what was going on or what they should do or who it was, so they decided to run away. But their escape wasn't part of Primo's plans. So the girl took air and mucus in her mouth and spat after the fleeing men. So much so that the stones began to fly as well. But it wasn't just air or light. It was Primo's secret technique, the light of destruction, which disintegrates everything it touches, all of which Menos watched from the air. And he had just seen Primo's destruction beam, which was merciless as always. Though if you think about it, Primo is the friendliest of all his creatures if you don't attack her, because she is a monster that doesn't like to fight, but loves peace and tranquility. But don't forget, if you threaten her peace of mind, you're finished, so she'll destroy everyone and everything for the sake of it. At this point, the girl smiled happily, informing me that the cleaning was finished. Menos then lowered himself to the ground and thanked her for a job well done. She rushed to hug her master and Glacia when she heard his voice. Menos pointed out that Primo always acts like a small animal, Plus, she was the first monster he created and had been by his side for 15 years. And she realized that the large area that had been destroyed was the work of her master. After looking around, the girl decided to clean up the trash and called her army to do it. From under the skirt of her dress began to pour out little slimes. She lined them up in a row and told them to clean up nicely since the master was looking at them. This nice cleaning up of the corpses looked like Sir. Here, Primo finished cleaning up and asked Menos why he had come to see her in person. Menos told her the news that he was no longer emperor and had decided to act from the shadows. Primo's reaction was the same as Eufil's. She didn't understand what had happened, to which Menos replied that it had become very tedious to rule. Menos revealed that he had found a successor and decided to live free, but Primo was already thinking about something else, namely what it meant to act together, and concluded that it meant she could do better and cared more now for her master. But then it came up that Primo had jammed the incoming messages from Eufil, so she hadn't gotten the information about Menos. The man asked her not to mock her comrade, and the girl protested, saying there was no such thing among the 7 kings. Menos asked Primo to turn on the sound and relay the message to the other kings, because among them were those who could destroy humanity by mistake. Primo caught the mini Primo, and through her she relayed the message that their lord was no longer emperor, but they would all defend the empire in secret. This process took a few seconds, and the message was received by everyone, as there is a mini Primo near each king that receives or transmits information. And the first response even came in. And it was a response from Eufil, whom Primo had ignored. The latter had been indignant about it, and the girl had simply crushed the mini Primo in her hands to avoid hearing it. But it was a clear demonstration of communication between demons. But Primo was more interested in whether she could now travel with her master, and he replied that yes, and taking care of him she could now too. It made her happy. But the question of defending this territory from invasions was an open question. But Primo figured that no one would be climbing from behind the gorge for a while, so the empire would be fine if she was away for a while. Nevertheless, Menos realized that the passageways remained, and although the Smale Kingdom's army was not a problem for him, it was a threat to Noah's new empire. So he decided to help the protagonists. Menos told Primo that they were leaving, and the defense there could be stopped. The girl couldn't get on Glasha, so the guy helped her. Besides, he had a plan to give the insolent neighbors an endgame. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Snail, a conversation was going on in the prince's chambers. One of the subjects reported that things had gone better than they thought, and an army of revolutionaries had killed the demon emperor. The king of Snail was drinking wine and said that they had successfully invested in the rebels, and now he planned to take over the Noah Empire because he thought that money was the only power, because whoever had a lot of money could hire an army and take over another country. In his opinion, money is both power and justice, and with the amount of money he had, he thought he didn't have to fear Noah's empire. He planned to take over a neighboring state, raise taxes there, and improve his castle with it. His advisor was worried that someone might hear them. But then there was a wild laughter, the origin of which they could not understand. And this conversation was heard by Menos, and he decided that he would not let them make the Noah Empire guilty of ripping people off like gooks. At that moment, a man wearing a mask, hat, and black cloak, who called himself the Phantom Thief Menos, appeared against the background of the moon. The king and his aide heard of him for the first time and asked how and why he had come here, to which Menos said that he had heard that too much treasure had accumulated in this castle, and it was time to share it. The guy knew that in the game, the ruler of Snail was a duplicitous man who was only interested in money. Yes, everything could be left as it was. But since this character made war with Noah's empire, he made it personal with him. So Menos shouted theatrically that he would take all the treasures that are in the castle to himself and make them weep bitterly. But the king was not frightened, but rang the bell. The Carol was not frightened, for he mistook Menos for a common thief and summoned a highly trained guard, who rushed at the order into battle. As the guards began to use magic against the man, he summoned his 8th level darkness magic and used the magic nullification spell. Everyone was shocked as their magic disappeared overnight, and Menos started to assure them that magic doesn't work on ghost thieves. But the king was sure that the guy couldn't do anything to so many soldiers. But Menos said cryptically that he didn't say he came here alone, and then there was already a move by Primo who began to use her skills. But then a soldier came running in, screaming that things were very bad, as a strange maid had appeared and destroyed the gate and the treasure house. At this moment, Primo appeared, who also wore a mask, carrying a huge sack, and informed her master that she had collected all the treasures and the largest items she had had to devour. The king, on the other hand, started grabbing the sack, telling the girl to return his money. He even informed Menos that someone had stolen the coins from the Noah Empire's treasury, but the guy didn't care. He asked him to stop saying nasty things about the Noah Empire. And then Menos remembered that he had taken some money for himself to travel when he ceased to be emperor. And then it came to him that he had ripped himself off. When already Menos and Primo were about to leave, the king started to fall on his knees and ask for his money back. Then the guy said he agreed to give it back, and the king was happy. But Menos added that he would return the coins to their former owners. Hearing such a wish from her lord, Primo briefly threw the sack towards the city, and coins began to fall on its streets. The impoverished people of the city and kingdom began to put up their hands and household items to collect as many coins as possible. Before leaving, Menos agreed with the king that money is power, and if he didn't have money, he couldn't hire an army. And without one, he couldn't collect taxes from the people and start wars. His money all fell in rain on the streets of the city, and tears flowed down the king's cheeks, his palace turning slowly into ruins. This evening, the attitude towards power in this country changed drastically, and the greed of the rulers of the Snail Kingdom led to their downfall. Primo, Menos, and Glasha were on their way home. Primo admitted that she was interested in acting as a ghost thief and asked the guy to do it again somehow, even though she didn't quite understand who a ghost thief was. Menos was having fun during their adventure, and that was all that mattered to Primo, for it reminded the girl of the past when Menos, Euphil, Primo, and Ari played supporters of justice. Menos vaguely began to remember something similar. He was about 9 years old then, and he hadn't even gotten to be emperor yet then. Back then, years ago, they all ran around town together and secretly helped people, made up names for their operations, and played associates of justice. There had been a time when he had wanted to be one, though there was no man more unsuited to justice than he. But as a child, he had loved the words in books: justice, kindness, hope. Then he dreamed of becoming a good man, like the hero of one of his stories, and being a good emperor, and he thought he had become one. But the people around him were too cruel, and took away the one he cared for, and he did not remain indebted to them. After that day, absolutely everything had changed. He realized clearly now, flying Glasha home instead of Primo. But Primo did not agree with him. He hugged him and told him that her master was still a good man, but he stood his ground. Time passed and dawn came. Menos thought he was getting strange feelings because of his long association with Primo, and he also warned her that she would have a lot of work to do when she returned, and the girl said only that she would try very hard to do it. Meanwhile, in the capital, everyone was rejoicing at the death of the demon emperor, and Alex the Empress was looking out the window, at which time Chancellor Guilford came to her with a report. He reported that the troops of the Kingdom of Snail had been withdrawn from the borders of the Noah Empire. The Phantom Thief and the maid had stolen 2 bags of gold from the treasury and given them to the common people, and the Phantom Thief had also returned money to their treasury. In addition, the group of heroes still wanted to destroy the 7 demonic kings. Alex made a mistake from the very beginning, having gathered a bunch of unknowable people as companions. Now they are even more proud. She was against them starting a demon hunt, as they needed to protect themselves first, and then asked the Chancellor what the Emperor's task was. The Chancellor suggested that the Emperor's main job is intimidation, meaning that the Emperor uses it to rally the people loyal to him and make sure the country doesn't fall under pressure, but intimidation and terror equal, sign 2 different things. After all, terror keeps people at a distance, and intimidation is a manifestation of love. Besides, the Emperor is obliged to be wise. The Chancellor asked the Empress what was troubling her, but she replied that everything was fine and apologized for detaining him. When the Chancellor left, Alex wondered if she could be an intimidating emperor. After all, she had made a revolution following her ideals. But right after that, the Noah Empire fell into chaos. The magical wall on the border fell. Even though the invasions have been stopped, it looks like they are lacking resources. But in addition to the fact that the enemies tried to break through the border, and inside the country there were those who did not like the new empress. as they tried to kill her several times. But every time something like this happened, a man in a black cloak would appear out of nowhere and save her life. Here she began to realize that if it wasn't for the stranger, she would have been dead a long time ago. Yes, she should become an intimidating emperor, but at the same time, she has no idea who she can trust and who she can't trust. She was also beginning to realize that one day there might come a day when the townspeople who loved her now would point their guns at her. And yes, she was insanely afraid of all of that. Plus, Alex started to recognize that Menos was a great emperor who feared nothing and no one. And through fear, he ruled the country and dealt with his enemies. It was only when she got to his seat, took his place, that the girl felt the full force of the weight of the loneliness of the throne room on her skin. At that moment, she remembered the words of the stranger who had saved her life the first time. He had asked her to try hard, but Alex doubted that someone like her was worthy of those words. But it was those words that gave her courage. Plus, she wondered who the man was who was smiling at her from beneath the black hooded hood. She thought this young man reminded her of a boy from her childhood, who had also helped her when she cried hard. Then that boy seemed to her very strong and kind. So in time, he became for her the embodiment of the image of a hero. All the time she'd been trying to be like him, but so far the girl had been very weak, so she felt that if that boy saw her, he would probably scold her. She hoped that the man who had saved her and wished her luck was the same boy from her distant childhood. Meanwhile, in his dreams, Menos began to see the same image more and more often. He was running somewhere with a girl and small monsters, at which point he heard someone call out to him. Before he could open his eyes, a happy Primo jumped on his bed, telling him it was morning and time to get up. Yes, he remembered late that he had brought home Primo, who was actively waking him up now, saying he would be late for the adventure. Yesterday, Menos had managed to defeat the Kingdom of Snail, took the money to the capital, returned home at night, and of course he was tired. That's why he couldn't wake up. So Primo wanted to use the destruction ray on him. It worked, and Menos woke up. The girl ran to the dining room, telling the master to come down too, because the food was already served. Menos suddenly realized that this morning was indeed a good morning. The flowers that Euphil had sent were growing. The pet monsters were running around quietly. Menos moved his home to the unexplored lands of the Forbidden Forest, as his previous home was quickly discovered. But it became a long commute to work, so he began traveling there by Glacia. For the boy, his home was the best. He started to get dressed, remembering that Primo had said that breakfast was ready and waiting for him in the dining room. But then he had a vague doubt about the girl's ability to cook. But as soon as he entered the dining room, he was almost blinded by the bright light. There was already waiting for him Euphil with a plate of food. The tree demon said that he made breakfast and he would continue to cook it, so Menos would have a balanced diet. He was very cheerful as his mood depended on the time of day, just like the plants did. Menos was shocked as the plate was full of raw demonic vegetables. Menos asked Euphil if he looked like a goat and he didn't like vegetables at all. Euphil started to educate his host about the benefits of vegetables. But Menos couldn't understand what he was getting at. So Demon told his host to stop grumbling and take a bite. Yes, they looked awful, but it was also obvious that they were fresh. So the guy took a bite of one of the vegetables. The moment he took a bite, he felt an indescribable flavor that gave off an earthy taste similar to common ingredients. Euphil became upset and decided to dribble his juice on them. At that moment, Primo flew like a meteor, snatched the plate from Menos and pounced on Euphil, saying that as the one in charge of the food had failed, so she too had made him a dish for breakfast and she was sure it tasted better. There was a large, raw slime on a plate in front of Menos. Menos wanted to taste it, so as not to offend Primo, but he wasn't sure he'd be okay afterward. When he took the first bite, an even taste spread across his mouth. It was as if sour and bitter were dancing instead. He didn't understand what was happening to him, and Primo and Euphil were arguing over whose dish tasted better to their master. At this point, Menos said they were both fired, but both Primo and Euphil got really upset. Then the guy said it wasn't their fault, but his, since he demanded to cook 7 demon kings for himself. After that, Menos decided to do something he hadn't done before, which was to create someone who would be in charge of cooking, so he started conjuring. So he summoned the hearth spirit Silky to create coziness in this estate with her help, and ordered her to prepare breakfast for him. Primo was upset and thought that Menos was tired of her since he created another maid. But the guy never thought of her as a maid. because to him he is the queen of destruction who loves to take care of him. Then Silky brought him some food to eat. Silky served him a real aristocrat's breakfast, which tasted pretty good. It was real human food to him. The first bite melted in his mouth. He felt the harmony of egg and butter was what he wanted as each dish complemented the other. After breakfast, Menos praised Silky and said that from now on she would be responsible for the food in the house. And she looked triumphantly at Euphil and Prima, who were shocked by this decision. But having recovered from the shock, they shouted in one voice, so that she did not think she had triumphed over them, but then began to argue among themselves whose dish was better. Suddenly, Euphil became wary and asked the Lord for permission to go patrol the forest, as there were anomalies on the Spirit Kingdom side, and some snakes were worried as well. Menos, while sipping tea, said that this is because of the Dragon King Nidhegg, who invaded the land of the elves with the purpose of destroying the Tree of Life in order to take revenge on humanity or become a god. At this point, Menos looked at Euphil and asked if they all thought he was just having fun. This delighted his loyal demons. Euphil summarized that destroying the Tree of Life would lead to their deaths too, for if this tree withered, everyone would die, for it is the lungs and heart of the planet, and the root system makes the magical particles circulate. And all living things are born from magical particles, and when they die, they return to the tree. But if you break the balance, all living things in the world will die, and if this all happens, it's going to be bad. So Menos asked Euphil to follow the Dragon King's movements, so he disappeared from the dining room. But the guy decided to do something too. So Primo started to pack him off to the guild, making sure he took his bento, flask, and handkerchief with him, then fixed his collar, and said she would take care of the house. So Menos dressed himself in his black robes and walked up to Glacia, and Primo wished him good luck and take care of himself and waved him off. The girl stood outside the house, smiling and waving at him, and suddenly he realized that he had always left Primo alone and ordered her to take care of the house. At that moment, he remembered the look on the girl's face and the words about how much fun she was having pretending to be a ghost thief. So he turned around and motioned for the girl to come with him. Her eyes rounded with surprise and joy and began to smile. On the way, Menos told Primo how to behave in the midst of people, not to release the beam of destruction, and in the city their identities are secretive. They came into town and approached the guild house. Menos worked there, and Primo would be working there from this day forward, so he would register her now. The girl was curious about what adventurers do. Anna and Miko were already at the guild, the latter asking if Mari Menos had come or not. It turned out that no one had seen him since he went to the Sokanashi wastelands. They both didn't know what had happened to the guy. Miko was outraged that as soon as he appeared, he disappeared without any messages, and she wished he was worried about her. And then he appeared behind her back and raised his voice, noting that the girl was worried about him. Menos started to embarrass Miko, but the girl denied it. Then Anna burned the office, saying that Miko was very worried, asking about him in the guild every day, and then even looking for him. Embarrassed, Miko started to say that if something happened to him during training, it would hurt her reputation, so he shouldn't be misguided, and started to try to hit him with her staff, but then Primo intervened. At that moment, Primo stood in front of Menos, covering him with herself and saying that even if the elf girl is an acquaintance of her master, she will not allow her to treat him like that. Then Miko grabbed the guy by the scruff of his neck and started asking him where he stole this girl. He asked to let him go and give him a chance to explain everything. So, Miko summarized. Menos came to the plains to see the battle, but it was already over. Then went home and took a relative who dresses as a maid, wanting adventure. Meanwhile, Anna registered the girl in the guild, giving her a rank of G, and Primo's card said she was 15 years old, her element was water, and her profession was maid. Though she was offered other options, she rejected them all but this one. But it could be the reason for the problem, as she might not be accepted into the group. But Primo naively looked at Miko and said that she was told by her master that there would be no problem since Miko would accept her into his group. The girl realized that he had planned this from the beginning. Besides, Menos added that Miko was an elder that he was proud of. Miko agreed, but on the condition that the training would end the moment Mati reached rank E. He also noticed that the girl was quite calm and made the assumption that she was in a state of dare. Miko, on the other hand, asked why he was always clinging to her weaknesses. It turns out that the fact that Menos knows her real name gives him the ability to manipulate her. But the girl asked him to be serious as they are starting training, specifically going to learn how to fight monsters, so they need to be careful even if the monster is weak. When they went to the forest, the girl asked not to be called Mikarin. Then the guy suggested calling her Miko, to which she agreed. And Primo asked what she should do during training. Miko said she would like the girl to fight, so she asked what she was good at. Primo replied that she was good at cleaning. Miko and Primo had a misunderstanding because the elf had no idea that the demoness could take down a S-rank monster alone. So she told her to stay behind her while she and Menos stunned the enemy. At that moment, Primo sensed someone fighting near them. Menos assumed it was the other adventurers, so they had better move away so they wouldn't be in the way. But Miko was against that and ran to where the fight was going on and pulled the others with her. In the clearing, there were indeed 2 adventurers fighting a stone golem, rank F, and clearly losing to it, but he couldn't care less. So Mikarin decided to intervene. She covered the black-haired girl with herself and began to conjure using 2nd-level light magic, activating the Wall of Light spell. While the golem was trying to break through Miko's spell, she jumped up, going to attack the monster from the air. At that moment, while it remained in one position, Miko used the unstoppable light spell and split the golem's head into pieces. After defeating the golem, Miko decided to heal the girl's wounds. With light magic, healing mode, she praised the girls, saying that they did a good job during this fight. Miko then asked the girls to be careful and went to Menos, saying that a real battle looks like this. At this point, Primo jumped into the conversation, saying that Miko was cool and that her master often says that the girl has good skills. Miko, on the other hand, though she knew she was strong, didn't think she was that strong. And Primo added that her master considered the elfess to be one of the 3 strongest in the world. Both Primo and Menos wanted to see more skills performed by Miko. Menos realized that the secret of Miko's strength was in the skill change of attire, and if she could become stronger, she would be able to defeat Primo thanks to it. So Menos stood aside and conjured up a monster, the Wolf of the Forest. The Wolf of the Forest is a beast that lives in the forest. Rank E, and its body is covered in vegetation. Menos informed Miko that there was a monster behind her and that she needed to use that very skill. But she used the Shining Bullet spell instead. But that spell didn't work. So Menos insisted on using another skill, but she didn't want to do it. The girl overcame her embarrassment, raised her staff into the sky and shouted words like an incantation, and right in the sky began to change her appearance. And in front of Primo and Menos, Miko appeared in a completely different outfit, more cute and feminine. Even the staff had changed. The wolf, on the other hand, stood there and didn't move. And Miko decided to fight him, but it seemed to the girl that the guy wanted to say something. But the guy denied and apologized. Menos knew that this skill turned Miko into a wizard girl for 3 minutes. But in the game, this transformation looked more natural. So he asked her if she was embarrassed to walk around in this. She said yes, and Primo thought this outfit was very cute. Miko decided to transfer her anger to the timber wolf as she thought it was all his fault, and Menos mentally asked for forgiveness from his creature. Meanwhile, the girl activated her dream magic and attacked the wolf. And then came the star cannon, which left the forest monster no chance for survival. There was a wolf, and there was no wolf. Menos explained to Primo that in Wizard Girl mode, all of Miko's characteristics and abilities were enhanced. She could break through any monster's defenses. The guy understood that in the game, Mikarin was a threat to all monsters with her monster scourge. But in addition, the girl herself has light magic that can resist the magic of darkness. He looked at her, realizing that this girl wizard is the girl created to kill monsters. Plus, he and she are complete opposites. They called her different names in the game. But then he asked her how much longer she would be in that outfit. She yelled at him since 3 minutes hadn't passed yet. She wanted to take off her dress quickly and hoped that no one would see her in it. But 3 adventurous girls ran out of the forest, and then they saw Mikarin in this interesting outfit. Their eyes became 5 kopecks each, and Miko was not thrilled with this turn of events either. After that, they turned around, said they wouldn't bother them, and left. And Miko reminded Menos that she was specifically in town to create a tough girl image, not this whole thing. At this point, Miko almost started crying. The guy offered to catch up with the girls and explain everything to them. But suddenly, the atmosphere changed. Menos, Primo, and Glacia took a fighting stance, hiding Miko behind them. Miko didn't understand Menos's actions and began to resent him, but he explained to her that the girls were under the snake eye effect. They approached the girls lying on the ground. It was an open question as to who had done it. Menos pointed to the bushes, and there was a huge snake there. Miko had never seen monsters like this before, but the guy was calm, even though it was a B-rank monster. But the problem wasn't that he was rank B. It was that there were so many of them. And it was strange that there were so many of them in this forest. They were surrounded, but the weirdness continued, which gave Primo and Menos a bad feeling. The snakes came too close, but there was no hostility coming from them. Besides, such snakes rarely gather in groups, as they can't act coherently. There was only one explanation for all of this. Someone was controlling them, and there was only one similar situation in the game. Through the serpents, like Primo through slimes, the Dragon King spoke. But his main message was that he was going to destroy humanity. He kept talking, saying that he had become much stronger and no one in this world could stop him. And he was going to invade Fairyland and destroy the whole world. He suggested that the boys bow their heads to him, as a human would not be able to defeat the dragon and start shaking with fear. And the entire human race, beyond his words, will be wiped off the face of the earth. But Menos and Primo just stared at the snakes, saying nothing for now. Menos realized that by doing so, the dragon was declaring the beginning of war and invasion of Fairyland. Even though he knew it was going to happen, it was still a very unexpected event. Miko was trembling with fear and couldn't believe this was all happening as she hadn't gotten stronger yet. And Menos remembered that Miko had been training away from her hometown for the sake of facing the Dragon King. In this world, the Dragon King and Mikorin are sworn enemies. But in the original, when it all started, Miko was already quite strong. But not today, because things didn't go according to plan because of his death. Menos assumed that the second and third boss would appear where he died. But today's Mikorin and Alex are incapable of standing up to Nidhegg, so humanity will be destroyed. But the Dragon King made the fatal mistake of announcing the start of the war before him, thus unleashing the war on him. So Menos walked over to the snakes and started talking quietly about how he had done the biggest stupidity of his life by saying such a thing in front of his last boss. After all, this world is his game, and he will not let anyone break his toy. The snakes freaked out and decided to attack Menos and company, but he only gave them a hard look and said that they'd only get signed for it end of game. At this point, Menos briefly gave Primo a direct order to clean up the clearing, and the girl happily decided to carry it out. Primo killed all the snakes and happily informed the Lord that she was done. Miko, on the other hand, couldn't believe that Primo had done all this. But to the girl, it was just normal cleaning. Menos, on the other hand, looked around and saw only dead snakes. The guy remembered that since the start of the war, all over the world will appear similar snakes, and one such reptile will be enough to kill dozens, if not thousands of people. So he accepted that he himself will kill the dragon, which ruined his game, he thought. So he ordered Primo to cover the ears of the Mikorin and contact the demon kings. To his creations he gave orders to destroy the serpents, since they had been declared war. After Menos gave the order, something strange began to happen in the forest. Animals began to emit battle cries and birds began to fly away. Mikorin, on the other hand, misunderstood what was happening. It was the opposite. The 7 demon kings had started to act, so there was no need to worry about the snakes, but the main thing was that they shouldn't overdo it. At that moment, Mikorin made a decision to save the fairy kingdom, but the adventurous girls started to stop her, saying that even she couldn't handle the dragon. But Miko was determined. After all, the fairy kingdom is her home and she must save it, even though there is a mystery queen there, and even though she is level 35. And then Menos pressed a finger to her lips, saying there was no new information she could say. Why waste time on all this? Since the events are all happening in real time, he didn't want to miss it, and he decided to send the adventurous girls to a safe place so they wouldn't get in the way under his feet. Now, no one would interfere with them. Miko, on the other hand, was shocked by his magic, and the guy reported that he had hidden the girls in the shadows, and now they could move to the fairy kingdom. Mikorin was surprised that Menos didn't stop her. He explained that he was well aware that the girl would be going home anyway. Her mood changed at that moment. She realized that she couldn't stay away when her home was in danger. and she wasn't a dainty and spoiled princess at all. After that, Menos gave orders to Primo, and she, without further ado, created a carriage out of a slime, on which they would ride to the fairy kingdom. Primo shoved Mikarin into the carriage, and Menos said that every princess should have a carriage and began to harness Glacia into it. And Primo wondered if the girls were comfortable and said that it was she who had created this carriage. But they were not going to go through the forest, but to fly over the forest. And then Glacia the pussycat turned into the winged Glacia, assuming her true form. Miko, on the other hand, couldn't believe what she was seeing, and Menos reminded her that she had met his pet before and asked her to hold on tight because they were starting to take off. And yes, they took a good acceleration and took off. Menos calculated that at this rate they would arrive at their destination by evening and let the game begin. Meanwhile, Mikarin remembered her childhood, how she used to run near a beautiful tree, catching flower petals and telling her mother that there are so many different colors in this world. Then her mother told the girl that there are many amazing things in the world, but the Dragon King is eating the roots of the world tree, so it is losing its powers. Mikarin, however, realized that these flowers were the last time she would see them. The Queen of Fairyland said that if the tree got well, those flowers Miko would see again, and the girl wanted to look at them together. At that moment, Menos brought the Mikarin back from memories to reality. He said that the Tree of Life could be seen from here. Noticing that she was nervous, he promised that they would definitely make it in time. All elves live quietly near the World Tree. They have little interaction with other races. Their job is to guard the tree, and this place is called the Fairyland of Pinkheart, and its capital Torunx is the City of Sunbeams. At first glance, on approach, everything was fine. Apparently, the Dragon King had not yet attacked Fairyland. Menos knew that this was a plot event he wanted to enjoy from the get-go, and it should begin after the conversation in the kingdom's castle. But then the carriage swayed violently, and Primo reminded Menos that the magic that keeps the vehicle in the air will soon run out. So the guy activated the removal of restrictions and used the wind magic of the 6th level. Mikarin didn't understand what kind of magic he was using. His magic was darkness. So how could he use another element's magic and even a level 6? Since the maximum was level 5, Menos told her not to scream as she would bite her tongue because of that. Menos then gave orders to Glacia to speed up and keep on course towards the Fairy Kingdom's castle. But then Mikarin said that the castle was surrounded by a barrier, and they would be crushed to pieces. So Menos asked Primo to break it, since it wouldn't hold the dragon anyway. And then the barrier was gone, and Miko started yelling at Primo again, not realizing what she spat out. Primo said it was the light of doom. But the good thing about this situation was that she didn't hit the Tree of Life with that beam. This and other things about Primo and Menos were causing Miko to have more and more questions, so she demanded an explanation from them when the Dragon War was over. When they landed, the guard soldier elves ran to meet them, saying that it was an invasion and they were under attack, so mages must be called to fight back against the enemies. Menos didn't realize what he had done wrong, so he decided to go out and explain everything to the guards. But a lot of arrows flew at him. But these were not ordinary arrows, but magical arrows fired from magical bows. On top of that, they were enhanced with accurate shot and explosion. Everything was done perfectly to kill the enemy. But for Menos, it was too easy, so he easily stopped the attack, because he was not so easy to kill. The guards were shocked by what happened. The guy turned out to be a braggart, because even though it was unspoken, but bragged that such tricks will not damage him, because his entire body is shrouded in aura of shadow. But even if he removes it, the enemy will have 5 attempts to eliminate him. But at this moment, the guy decided to do magic as well, and used 9th level darkness magic. And from his arsenal of spells, he chose gravity. The guards didn't understand what kind of magic it was, but realized that at this rate they could die here. But then Miko came upon Menos screaming at him about being a real idiot and acting like the ultimate villain. At this point, the elves began to realize that their princess was back. Footsteps sounded, and a beautiful elfess appeared on the doorstep. Menos realized from the silence that ensued that it was the queen, and she asked who was disturbing the peace of the place. Yes, this was the Queen of Fairyland, but at the same time, she was also Mikarin's mom and was apparently quite harsh on her daughter. All together, they walked into the throne room where Mikarin and Menos spoke of the Dragon King's message. The queen understood the situation. Sitting at the long table, the queen asked Menos if she understood correctly. The three of them had come here to challenge the Dragon King. Minos looked straight into the queen's eyes, but Mikorin couldn't bear to look at her and averted her eyes. The guy remembered that Miko had left Fairyland after a fight with her mom, so he decided to smooth things over. He put his feet on the table and said that everyone in the castle was very weak, so they'd better leave the place, and the three of them would deal with everything. The elves behind the queen's back began to say that he was the one who attacked the castle, that he was being rude to their queen, and Minos squinted predatorily and noted that they had too much energy, which silenced the soldiers. Also, Minos didn't understand why they were looking at him angrily. After all, he had come to help them. The boy thought that the main reason was that he put his feet on the table. But it was not quite so, because the way he behaved in general was like the behavior of a badass. And in addition, Primo began to threaten everyone around. The queen stopped the outrage of her soldiers with a gesture of her hand. The woman stood up from the table, saying that she understood the arrivals, but she didn't need their help and started to leave the room. She was at that moment called out by Mikorin. The princess tried to reach out to her mother, but the queen wouldn't listen to her either, especially now, as she has no time for idle talk. But Mikorin didn't give up, saying that Minos and Primo, though idiots, were very strong, and she herself had trained hard, and now they were serious in their intentions as the country was in danger. So the girl didn't understand why the queen was refusing their help. Here the queen walked over to her daughter and leaned over to her, tapping the tip of her staff against the floor, saying that she would only be in the way. After all, when it comes to a strong enemy, they cannot be weak, as weakness will lead to the death of many soldiers, and Miko will be in the way, as they will have to be distracted by her defense, and it will come to more losses than necessary. At that moment, the queen pointed her hand at the soldiers, muttered that did she really think she didn't care that her comrades would die because of her, and added that a princess had no place in this war. Having said all this, the queen turned around and started to leave the room, telling her daughter lastly to get the hell out of here. The queen's words brought Miko to tears, so she said she hated the woman and ran away. But the queen didn't stop her. But at this point, Minos decided to act. He approached the queen and said that now she would have to listen to his threat, since she still didn't understand anything. The queen was surprised at the wording, as she had not expected to hear a threat rather than advice, and Minos continued. He said that if she tried to stop him in this battle, the game would be over for her already. This both surprised and angered the queen, but Minos didn't care about her hurt feelings. He made the point that all the elves combined could not defeat the Dragon King without his help. The queen noticed that he spoke as if he knew ahead of time. Minos did not deny it, for he did know the course of events. And for the Fairy Kingdom, the outcome of the battle with the dragon would be sad. Many elves, including the queen, would die, but that didn't impress the queen, and she said she didn't need any advice as she had raised her level to 35th, and that was enough to defeat a rank A monster. The problem is that the Dragon King is SS rank, which makes it impossible for Mysteria to defeat him, as it requires at least rank 60 but not 35. Yes, she can defeat a rank A monster, but not a dragon, even though she has been preparing for years after hearing the prophecy. But in any case, the queen is ready to fight for the future of this country and the world to the last drop of her blood. And it's obvious that she is. On that note, she decided to end the conversation as she needed to get ready for battle. But as she left, she hinted to Minos and Primo to keep an eye on Mikorin, because she was very fond of looking for trouble on her own head. She left, leaving Minos with his thoughts. And the guy realized that the mother loves her daughter, but doesn't know how to express her feelings. So she hurts her instead of talking and finding common ground. Plus, if it's like in the game, the queen will die on the battlefield and poor Mikorin will have a nervous breakdown that will have negative consequences. Something inside the girl breaks and she starts mindlessly destroying monsters like a machine. But such an ending was too uninteresting for Minos. But this time, he personally decided to intervene in the battle, so they were guaranteed victory. First, he asked Primo to protect the castle. Although the girl was afraid of the elves, he assured her that they were more afraid of her. Besides, he realized that Primo could protect the castle from the dragon, but he could not defeat it. But defeating the dragon Nidega for a happy ending to this story requires the special power of Mikorin. So he went to look for the girl, In the castle and around the castle, he didn't find her. But in the game, the girl had a special place. So he decided to look for her there. But then Euphil appeared in front of him. The demon reported that the Dragon King would soon be in action. But it was happening much later than Menos expected. Perhaps it was because most of his snakes were killed by the Demon Kings, so he had to reassemble them. Menos remembered that the dragon had used the snakes to split the elven army into 2 parts. Menos was thinking about strategy. Chasing away or fending off the dragon's attack wouldn't be that hard, but killing it would be the opposite. He decided to use Primo and Euphil to fight it, since they were the strongest. But Menos realized that the dragon wouldn't act fairly, but rather the other way around. The guy realized that the dragon has many skills that increase its survivability, and if it finds itself in a critical situation, it will use the transition gate skill and escape. So he decided to use a few things, namely himself. So he informed Euphil that he would fight the Dragon King himself in person. Euphil looked at his host and asked what he meant by that. Menos smiled and said that he decided to show his true colors for the first time in a long time. Menos then summoned the demon to him and gave him instructions. Euphil agreed that his master had come up with something interesting as always, so his task should be carried out on his signal for the best ending to this event. Next, Menos went to continue looking for Mikarin. Everything was just as he thought. He found her in her secret place. The girl looked at him and was surprised that he had managed to find her. Menos said he knew her very well. She thought he had come to mess with her, but that wasn't the case. Guy, on the other hand, didn't hesitate to say he was taking her away for defense training. But Mikarin was too upset and resentful of her mother, who said she would only get in the way in battle. Mikarin informed the boy that she had always studied and trained hard in order to become stronger and protect her mother and the others. That she thought that was how the queen would recognize her. But it wasn't to be. All this information Menos knew, so he wanted to let it pass and wanted to go back to the castle, and the girl wanted him to at least try to calm her down. Menos tried, but the attempt failed, so Mikarin decided to stay there. And Menos realized that he made a mistake with the phrase, because in the game, Alex said a very correct phrase, after which they returned to the castle. But it happened that he could not behave like the main character. Besides, the time was up. As the Dragon King's invasion of Fairyland began at this time, he flew right over Minos and Mikarin's heads. The flying monster roared that he was the Dragon King Nidhegg, and he was and is and will be the one to bring doom to mankind. But Mikarin, looking at the dragon, was confident that her mom could handle it as she was very strong and the barrier wouldn't let it through. But Menos pointed out that the girl didn't understand anything as the barrier was designed for a rank A monster, and the dragon was rank SS. Thus, the barrier would not be able to stop the Dragon King from striking him with his tail, teeth, and other parts of his body. The dragon's next move was a fiery breath, under which the barrier failed. So soon it collapsed. Mikarin couldn't believe her eyes. Thereupon, the Dragon King gave orders to his kin, that is, the serpents, to attack and conquer these lands. Mikarin fell to her knees and stared wide-eyed at everything that was happening. These events were like the end of the world. Menos, looking at this, realized that the hero who was supposed to stop the dragon was not here, and at this rate, the world would definitely end. So the guy took the girl by the hand and led her forward, saying that they would now go to the battlefield and would surely fight and defeat the dragon. And then her mother would surely acknowledge the girl. But Mikarin didn't want to go as she is really weak. And she was always weaker than him. Yes, she enjoyed being called strong, but not today. She realized that she had no chance for today, so she would not fight. Menos asked her if she was okay with it, watching everything she cared about perish. The girl could not look at it calmly. But despite this and other arguments and entreaties from Menos, Mikarin did not want to go to fight, as she believes that her mother is right, and she will only be a hindrance on the battlefield, and those who will try to protect her will die. The girl was crying bitterly, for she was afraid that her mother might die because of her weakness, so she asked the boy to go by himself. Mikarin stood her ground. She wasn't going to go with Menos because she didn't want to get in the way, but that didn't impress the guy. Menos didn't deny that Mikarin was weak. He sometimes even found it funny when the town called her strong, but it wasn't up to her to decide if she was going to get in the way or not. It was up to him as to whether she was worth anything or not. The next thought he did not voice. As this world is his game, he will decide with whom he will fight shoulder to shoulder. And without Miko, it will be difficult for him in this fight, because there are things that only a girl could handle. Holding her hand, the boy said he needed her, and the girl became embarrassed and cried after hearing such nonsense from Menos. Menos was a poor judge of girls' emotions, so he couldn't tell if Miko's tears were a good or bad sign. But since they had little time and there was no point in coaxing her, he took her in his arms and went wherever the battle called for. At this, the girl began to resent it, and Menos said he had taken her in his arms as a princess, and generally, from this moment, let her consider herself kidnapped by him. And then he added that she needed to be an obedient girl and not twitch, at which point she stopped crying. That's when they went into battle, and so they made it to the castle just as the fire blazed, but Menos told Mikarin not to worry. Besides, the guy's wolf appeared beside them. Menos had no need to use eloquence, for Glacia understood him at once and assumed her true form, at which time they saw Primo on the roof of the Demon Queen reported back that she kept the castle from being damaged as requested, but the elves didn't sit still in the castle and wouldn't let her in either. Meanwhile, the elves, led by the queen, were trying to fight the dragon. They were using level 2 ice arrows to do so, and the queen's level 5 light magic was a light bomb. But this had no effect on the Dragon King. He called them all weak and began to use his magic and attack, under the onslaught of which the defense of the elves began to crack at the seams. It shattered the elves' defenses completely, many of them already lying unconscious, the queen herself barely standing on her feet, leaning on her staff. At that moment, Mikarin ran up to the queen. She hugged her mom, who was hurt, but kept talking about how she asked her not to come here. Only now, Mysteria realized that Menos was right. She was the one who underestimated the Dragon King's power, so she was now asking her daughter to run away and save herself. But Mikarin wasn't going to listen to her. At this point, the dragon gloated, noting the touching nature of the moment. But honestly, he didn't care, as everything paled in the face of his immense power. He kept amusing himself and saying, "Let despair fall upon their heads," for they knew not what to do and trembled with fear of him. Menos realized that none of the elves would be able to survive from the Doomsday Flame, as level 100 was required to survive. But the dragon didn't take something into account, namely Menos, who stepped in front and prevented him from using the flames, summoning a slime that filled the dragon's entire maw. To attack with the Doomsday Flame, the dragon needs to charge up, and during this time, Menos can summon a monster to block the attack, thus making it impossible to use the flame. Menos, on the other hand, looked the Dragon King in the eyes without a drop of fear, saying that he liked what he said about everything being meaningless in the face of overwhelming power. This infuriated the dragon, and he asked who the guy was. To this, Menos replied that he was the former last boss, but the dragon didn't understand what that meant. Menos phrased it more simply, saying he was the strongest and most admirable in this world, but the dragon thought that was nonsense and tried to sizzle him again. But again, he ate slime. The Dragon King was getting fed up with this, so he informed them that resistance was futile, and he would now burn down the World Tree and put an end to humanity. After these words, he spat fire at the World Tree, and the Elf Queen remarked that he had thought so-and-so about the purpose of the attack on Fairyland. At the same moment, Mysteria coughed up blood, startling Mikarin, but the mother spoke to her daughter about how it would be better if she went far away from home and never came back. But Mikarin replied that she had come home to protect her, and the queen realized at that moment that her daughter was too much like her. And the queen admitted that she also wanted to protect her little girl, who was so fragile and delicate like a flower. So she wanted a life of an ordinary girl for her. She apologized to Mikarin, admitting that she had been a bad mom to her and asked her to save her life by running far away from here. Mikarin realized that her mother was going to die so soon, and the woman pleaded to take the Mati Menos girl away from here and save her life, to which Menos said he didn't want to do that. There was a silent pause, after which the guy said that the most interesting thing had started, the battle with the boss, so he wouldn't run away. After these words, he unzipped a secret pocket and took out some kind of bottle, poured the liquid from it on the queen, saying that here he would decide what the end would be. After that, the Elf Queen was as good as new. Her skin even began to glow, and Menos thought that this medicine had more healing power than he had realized. This partially changed the ending for the better, as Mysteria is alive, as are the other elves, But the queen was aware that she would not have the strength to defeat the dragon. She said that not years of training, nor wasted effort, nor humans could defeat a dragon. Menos agreed with that. After all, he said from the beginning that she and the other elves will not win. They will only get in the way. But no one listened to him. That's why the game is getting so interesting now. For Menos, this situation and the whole world was like a game. So a stalemate, a strong opponent, and the end of the world sounded very interesting to him. Neither Mikarin nor Mysteria understood him, and he was going to have a good time, since the main character was not on the stage and he had free reign. Just then, one of the soldiers came running in and reported that huge snakes were climbing the walls. Menos, on the other hand, had anticipated such a development, so he turned to Primo to signal it. The girl quickly summoned a mini Primo and through it relayed a message to Euphil, who began exterminating the snakes. Tree roots sprouted from the ground and set the snakes on themselves like meat on a skewer. The elves who were keeping watch were greatly shocked at what they saw. Menos came up with all of this based on his knowledge. Euphil scattered the parasite tree seeds in advance. The snakes were infected by them as they crawled, and when the demon got the command, he made the seeds germinate, thus killing all the snakes. When the reptiles were finished, the last stage left was the boss battle, which Menos marched in and called Mikarin to come with him. Mikarin got up and was about to go with Menos, but Mysteria tried to stop her, saying that if she went there, she would die, but Miko interrupted her, but then hugged her tightly and apologized for her words when she insulted her by calling her an idiot. Mikarin recognized that she was weak, but nevertheless, there were things that only she could do, so she is going to go and fight in order to fulfill her dreams. She said she loved her mom and turned and ran to Menos, who was waiting for her. The queen wanted to call out to her, but stopped and looked after her daughter, who was rapidly moving away from her. After that, the guy praised her for her good words, and Miko replied that he was the one who said he needed her power, and in general, he was the one who kidnapped her. So in case of anything, he should take responsibility for it. They high-fived each other and made a promise. And Mikarin wondered if she would be able to see those flowers from her distant childhood today or not. Then her mother told her that Miko could see the beautiful flowers if the world tree got well, and then they would look at them together. So the girl made a promise that day to protect the tree. She was determined as a child to slay the evil dragon, to see the beautiful flowers, to have peace in the world, to... Beautiful flowers bloomed all over the world. This was the elf princess's goal, her dream, so now she was determined. At this time, Menos was telling his plan to Primo that Glacia and Mikarin would take their positions, and Primo was surprised that she wouldn't have to destroy anything today. So she decided to protect the others and wait for her master, since he would do all the destruction today. Primo sat down in a deep curtsy and wished her lord a successful and unforgettable hunt. The latter only smiled at that. And Menos, every time he saw someone destroying what people protect so much, how lives were ruined, he immediately thought back to his childhood. Years ago, as he stood in a pool of blood of the innocent girl he was protecting, he became a demon lord. That day he made a promise to himself that he would never again allow what was rightfully his to be taken away from him. He tried to be strong and considered kindness a weakness, and began to take away so that it would not be taken away from him. So now he was about to do the same thing. So he applied the seal-breaking skill and released all his skills. Out of the darkness, out of the shadows, hundreds of demons and different creatures began to crawl out. And Menos realized that he was not to be the hero of this fascinating story. He realized that even if he became good, he would never be able to become a fighter for justice. But he could not live the life of an ordinary person because of the emptiness inside. But if it comes to destruction, he has no equal in it. Violence, malice, arrogance, greed. This wretched dragon was inferior to Menos in each of these vices. At this moment, Menos' transformation began. Yes, he was not a hero and defender of justice, but he was the final boss of this world. He took his true form. It was no longer human, but to the end a demon. But even in this guise, he was beautiful. The game had begun. The Dragon King saw that everything was going according to plan up to a certain point. But then something went wrong. He needed very little time to accomplish his goal. The moment he flew towards the world tree, he saw that trees had sprouted through the bodies of his reptiles, thus killing them. The Dragon King stopped, unable to believe his eyes. He realized that it all happened in an instant. But the people of this world don't have that kind of strength. No strength to resist the snakes and him. So how could this have happened? Who could have done it? Out of anger, the Dragon King didn't wait any longer and used flame breath. But suddenly, he saw a human where there shouldn't have been one. But the Dragon King did not pay attention to this, because the man was under his direct attack and therefore could not survive. But he was wrong, and a hand with black claws appeared from the flames. At that moment, Menos, in the guise of a demon, launched a counterattack. For this, he used 10th level water magic and the Absolute Zero spell. The Dragon King, after such an attack, was still surprised to see his flames disappear. But there was no water to wash it away, nor any wind to blow it away. And what happened was the following. All the flames the dragon had used were extinguished by nothing other than a chilling chill. This cold and ice not only got to the plants and flames, but also to the dragon as its wings began to freeze little by little. Toward the dragon, something or someone began to approach, and he looked fearful, but took note that the dragon had indeed grown large. Especially this contrast in height could be seen when Menos came close to him. The dragon, who was already on the ground, did not expect to see such a thing. Looking at the demon emperor, albeit a former one, the dragon realized that he had forgotten how to breathe. And time seemed to stop as he was mesmerized by the sight of Menos. At the same moment, the guy decided to tell the Dragon King why he had no chance of winning this battle. It was very simple. The dragon's main mistake was that he, Menos, was in front of him now. 2, the dragon wasn't supposed to let him near him, but run from him. But the Dragon King had no intention of doing that yet, though he felt a lot of pressure. And the guy's appearance raised questions, and the magic he was using. But the kid was still human, for he was certain that the man could not defeat him, and on that note, he rushed to the attack with the desire to teach the man who had challenged him a lesson. But Menos stood and did not move. The Dragon King was sure that if flames didn't work, normal brute force would, so he decided to tear the guy apart with his claws. But the guy activated level 10 swordsmanship magic. He had a sword where his arm had turned into a paw, which he decided to use with the Dimension Splitter spell. With one precise blow, Menom sliced off the Dragon King's hand-paw hand and it flew to an unknown destination. The dragon howled with pain and resentment. He did not understand where the guy got the sword, and the blow itself he did not see and did not feel. But nevertheless, the paw was cut off. The Dragon King clenched his teeth in pain. Blood was gushing from his wound. He missed this blow as it was too fast, and in general, he couldn't understand how the guy was able to penetrate the armor of his scales. And Menos thought that everything happened too easily. So the former emperor decided to play with the Dragon King. He offered him the following conditions. If he can at least scratch him, then he will let him go, while not moving from the place. The dragon thought the guy was messing with him, so he decided to divert his attention and then strike him with his tail. But Menos would not be fooled by this. He activated his 10th level axe skill and chopped off part of the dragon's tail. The Dragon King was confused as he couldn't understand how the guy had managed to counterattack him. He had thought it through after all, and Menos pretended to suggest that he shouldn't have done it. Since the Dragon King couldn't attack the guy up close, he decided to fly a decent distance away from him and try to sizzle the guy up. But the Dragon King's quick use of his trump card didn't scare Menos, but introduced a state of boredom. So he used a 10th level bow skill, and the spell he activated was Crescent Moon. The arrow pierced the Dragon King's mouth with amazing accuracy. The dragon started coughing up blood and the doomsday flames disappeared, and the reptilian began to realize that no matter how much he put himself out there in this fight, he couldn't and wouldn't be able to get the guy. At this point, Menos informed the dragon that this was the final moment of the warm-up and asked him to entertain himself some more, as he had yet to show what the pathetic human was capable of doing. The dragon considered Menos's words of amusement as humiliation. Oh, after all, the Dragon King and the guy was human. But looking at him and his magic, the dragon realized that Menos could hardly be called human. The dragon realized that calling the guy strong wasn't enough. His magic level was prohibitive, and there was nothing he, the Dragon King, could do about it. The reptilian couldn't understand who Menos was, and he was really starting to get scared as his opponent was undefeated. Menos stared predatorily at the Dragon King. He was only interested in one question. Was this all he was capable of? Was this the end of the game? The guy continued. saying that the dragon still had 2 legs and 1 arm left, and that was enough to fight, and he wasn't done with his invalid yet. The dragon, stammering, asked the guy to wait. Seizing the moment, the dragon began to persuade Menos to become allies and rule this world together, but that was not what Menos wanted. He stopped the reptile and asked ingratiatingly about whether he had given the dragon permission to beg for mercy. The boy jabbed his finger at the Dragon King and said that he was nothing more than a toy for him, and that he only needed him for entertainment and nothing else. At that moment, the dragon realized that he was facing a monster. It turned out that in front of him was not a man but the embodiment of real, pure evil. That this guy was holding back his powers in order to stretch the moment of the game, and once it bored him, he would break it like a tired toy. He is not a champion of justice. It's much worse than that. But Nidhegg was wrong in another of his assumptions. This world, from its inception until this day, belongs to Menos. So it was foolish to suggest splitting the power between the two of them. Having made his speech, Menos realized that there would be no continuation of the battle, so it was time for him to put an end to this boring game. Something unthinkable began to happen on the battlefield. A huge number of different magic circles appeared above the dragon's head. The entire sky was filled with magical circles. To do such a thing, you would need to have great magical power or a special artifact. What was happening now was a challenge to God himself. Magic that could wipe anything off the face of the earth. Magic that changed the world? It was Menos' unique magic. He was going to use one of his deadly techniques. The guy wanted the dragon to know despair, and the Demon Emperor called it Apocalypse Nova. The Dragon King was trapped and could not be saved. The dragon was in agony from Menos' attack. Mysteria, Queen of the Elves, with the other elves, watched it from a safe place. She saw the sky in magical circles, the defeated dragon and pillars of light. At this point, Primo and Eufel were in the forest. They expected nothing less from their lord. But Eufel seemed to think it was too much for Nidhegg. His and Privo's strength would have sufficed as well. But Eufel still thought that it would be better for him and Primo to do all the dirty work and for their master to keep his hands clean. But Primo disagreed, asking her comrade to pay attention to the expression on their master's face at that moment. The girl noticed that Menos today, at this moment, looked happy and smiled. And before, when he took this form, he was always sad or expressed strong anger and danger. But today he was just having fun. She understood that Menos had always dreamed of doing something like this. And Eufel, glancing at her, remarked that she knew their master very well. Primo happily replied that she was their master's #1 comrade, to which Eufel remarked that order didn't matter here, but what mattered was how much you were trusted. And here she was, clearly losing to him, as she had filled a much more important role in their master's plan. These two could not decide between themselves who was more important and better. Everything came to verbal insults. But then, Menos came down to earth. This attack of Menos did not kill the victim, but it dealt a significant maximum damage, after which the victim could not resist in combat. It was the most powerful attack of Menos and the entire game. After the attack, falling to the ground, the Dragon King would recognize himself as the loser, not realizing where this character got such immense strength from. But the dragon did not fall to the ground, but into the spatial gate, which he had prepared in advance in order to escape in a critical situation. Because he realized that Menos could do something with his mana, the Dragon King hoped that after such a powerful spell, the guy wouldn't be able to react quickly and interrupt his escape plan, so he bid him farewell for good, but he was wrong again. Like so many times before, Menos had shattered the dragon's dimensional gate at the snap of his fingers, cutting off its escape routes. It was a bit disappointing for Menos. He thought that Nidhegg was an Sranga monster, and he was going to run away like a coward from the battlefield, but the guy saw it coming and sealed the dragon's spatial gate, since no one can escape from the battlefield with the final boss. Yes, Nidhegg would not be able to escape, but it was not a complete victory over him, because although his health was now at 1, but his resistance and defense skills were now at an all-time high, and it would not be possible to deal direct damage either. Menos recognized that the final blow would not be for him, and it should belong to the monster killer, namely Mikarin, so he summoned a girl to the battlefield. The boy flew off to the side, and Mikarin swept past him on Glytia, ready to deliver the final blow to the Dragon King. Before the battle began, Menos came up with a plan. Mikorin and Glasha were to hide using invisibility. And once the guy destroyed the dimensional gate and the dragon was revealed, she would need to strike. And so the dragon became open to attack. Mikorin used her outfit change skill and transformed into a wizard girl. Mikorin's appearance on Glacia was a complete surprise to Dragon King Nidhegg, and the girl was already beginning to conjure an attack. She was insanely scared. She realized that she was still too weak, that she was no match for a mighty dragon like Nidhegg. At this point, Mikorin thought of Medi Menos fighting this monster one-on-one. The girl couldn't imagine what he had to go through to become so strong. It gave her confidence, for this attack would be the first step for her to become stronger and be able to defend what she cared about. It was only now that Mikorin realized that only her magic could make her dream a reality, not anyone else's. And Menos, behind her back, was encouraging the girl to take action, saying that she should not be afraid now but to change the course of the storyline. So Mikorin, with determination and strength, shot her dream magic at the Dragon King Nidhegg, which was supposed to shine through. She used the star cannon against the dragon, as it was the one that could bypass the dragon's defenses and deal the last drop of damage. Thus, the weak would defeat the strong. Menos realized that the dragon only had 1 unit of health left, so this attack of Mikorin's stanza was crucial for him. In this simple way, the end of the game had come for Dragon King Nidhegg, and Menos rejoiced and smiled at it like a little child. Dragon King Nidhegg, realizing it was the end, said it was wrong, but nevertheless fell to the ground in the forest defeated. The Dragon King's fall was so hard that the ground fell beneath him. Menos and Mikorin on Glitia slumped beside him, and the girl couldn't believe they had won. The girl didn't fully realize that she was the one who had gotten him. Menos reached out and stroked her hair, telling her she was a big, smart girl. She didn't want him to do that. After all, she wasn't a child, and Menos smiled kindly at her. Meanwhile, Mysteria realized that these two had defeated the dragon after all. At this time in the fairy kingdom, people were beginning to rejoice as the Dragon King had been defeated. Everyone was hugging, smiling, and having fun. Meanwhile, Menos, standing next to Mikorin, realized that they had achieved a happy ending by changing fate. But that wasn't all, for the perfect ending had not yet been reached. There was still one unfinished item in Menos's plan, so he turned to Mikorin. She and Menos came to the place where Mikorin and her mother had looked at the beautiful flowers as a child. At that coin, the effect of the outfit change skill had ended, and the girl was back in her usual clothes. The girl noticed the fatigue coming on strong and abruptly. Menos also sealed his power and took on his usual appearance and said he was a bit tired too. Mikorin said she was surprised, as Menos used cool moves one after another, and even cornered the dragon. But it wasn't that easy, and Menos hinted to Mikorin that he had to pay a price for such great strength as well. The girl suggested that Menos's lifespan was shortened after such a fight, but he replied that his muscles would be very sore tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But this pain won't be easy. His whole body will hurt. He won't be able to walk, and even his stomach will cramp from the pain. After that, Mikorin noticed that Menos is acting like a child, and he didn't understand what he should do if he didn't like pain. With this statement, he ruined the image of a cool guy. Mikorin, on the other hand, got angry when the guy asked her about the fact that she thought he was a cool guy. Menos, on the other hand, changed the topic of conversation. He said he would bitch about the pain in his body, as he enjoyed the event so much. And since they saved the world as well, he had a lot of fun in the process. After these words, Mikorin realized that she had nothing to add, because the guy is like that, and from only smiled while looking away. But at that moment, Mikorin sighed, gathered her courage, and asked the guy who he really was. They looked at each other, eye to eye. But Menos looked away, for it was difficult for him to give a truthful answer to this question. After all, he never thought of telling the truth to anyone, because he used to be the demon emperor who ruled the Noah Empire, the strongest man and the boss of this world, but now he is not the last boss. Now he realized that he would not name the regalia of the past, and called himself the freest man of this world. And to live in this world as one wishes is considered evil. Mikorin suddenly saw petals of beautiful flowers flying, and Menos remembered that many, many years ago, the world tree bloomed all year round. Right now, it seemed that the entire sky was filled with pink fog. The entire kingdom was enveloped in the pink petals of the world tree's flowers. Now this kingdom was definitely a fairy tale kingdom. The girl, on the other hand, began to cry tears of joy from the overabundance of feeling, for it had been a long time since she had seen so many flowers on the world tree. At this point, Menos looked at Mikorin and asked if she liked this ending to the story. She said she did. She turned to the guy and, smiling broadly, thanked Menos sincerely from the bottom of her heart. All his conscious life, the guy lived under the motto, take, destroy, break. But today, at the point of here and now, he felt, thanks to Mikorin, that it is not so bad to live differently. At that moment, Queen Mysteria and the other elves ran to them under the tree. The queen ran up and hugged her daughter, and Menos swelled with pride as even the main character of the story had not seen such a happy ending. Menos realized that this end to the dragon fight was only possible because Menos was here. Meanwhile, Primo and Euphile were sitting in the tree. The girl was happy for her master. Meanwhile, in the capital city of Noah Empire, Chancellor came to Empress Alex with a report. He reported that the fairy kingdom was attacked by the dragon king Nidhegg. The girl thought that the reptile was defeated by Queen Mysteria. But no, intelligence reported that Princess Mikorin won and a young man with silver hair who was dressed in a black robe. Over the last words, the Empress pondered the... At the same time, in the Palace of the Elves was a celebration. The guy could not believe that not so long ago he was the Emperor of Darkness, the enemy of everyone and everything, and now he is looked at with adoration, poured wine. So he is not at all drawn to become an emperor again. The Ediths wept, turning to Menos, saying that he had not only defeated the dragon, but had also revived the world tree. So they lacked words to express their gratitude, bowing to him and thanking him. But another problem loomed. Menos was starting to get insanely bored sitting on his throne, eating delicious food and drinking wine. He can't deny that he's being fed good food, and he likes it. And it's nice to be praised. But it's been going on for a week without stopping. Menos liked it for the first 30 minutes, got bored afterward, but was told that the elves would praise him for as long as they saw fit. But if it lasted any longer, he would die of boredom. Menos's moods were noticed by Mysteria, and she asked what was going on with him and offered to bring other food and drinks if he didn't like these ones. The guy confessed to her that he was tired of it all, so the queen decided to tell him an interesting and funny story from which he will definitely be laughing. Menos was beginning to be intimidated by this woman already, but still asked out of politeness what the story would be about. The queen said that the story would be about Mikorin. The moment Menestria began to tell her story about how near the tree she said she wanted the whole world to be filled with flowers. Here came Mikorin running into the room, demanding that her mother stop saying embarrassing things about her. Mysteria began to hug and praise her daughter, saying that she is the sweetest and kindest, even when she is angry. Menos noticed that the daughter and mother had made up and were communicating well with each other. But Menos was tired of looking at their relationship as well, so he wished he could take part in some event that even he couldn't have predicted. At that moment, an excited elf girl came running into the room. This elf apologized to Queen Mysteria for interrupting the festivities, but he needed to report that a messenger had come from the direction of the Noah Empire with a message from the new Empress Alexandra. The queen asked to invite a messenger as a guest of honor. Miko decided to go to this meeting with her mother, but the girl was worried about such a sudden event. Menos was sure that the messenger had been sent about the death and attack of the dragon, as it had almost destroyed the world once before and now it was defeated. It was understandable that everyone wanted to know the details. The guy continued his thought that it was unlikely that the Noah Empire wanted to ruin relations with the fairy kingdom. Mikorin thought it turned out that Mari Menos was very even-minded. He agreed with that statement. It was strange that Miko hadn't thought of it herself. The queen was in agreement with the boy's thoughts, but she decided to listen to the messengers first before jumping to conclusions. Yes, Menos was right. The Empress had sent her messenger to find out as much information as possible about how Nidhegg had been defeated. The queen understood the intentions of the Noah Empire, whose goal was to find out how strong the fairy kingdom was. Plus, Alexandra feared that the dragon could be a problem for them as well. Dialogues and events like this were common between nations, but the problem was different. In the original game, after the fall of the dragon, this event didn't happen. Menos pondered the fact that his victory over Nidhegg might have changed the course of events greatly again, or it was something he had no idea about. But then the messenger added that Empress Alexandra personally wanted to meet those who had defeated the dragon, namely with Princess Mikarin and an unknown guy in a black cloak who has challenged the dragon destroyer himself. Thus, the messenger was conveying the invitation of the day for Mikarin and Menos to visit the royal palace of the Noah Empire. Queen Menestria realized that such an invitation from the Empress was a rarity. Miko was ecstatic, turning to Menos. But here was the one who wasn't as happy. At that moment, the messenger turned his attention to him. He said that Empress Alexandra was very interested in his personality, so she personally wanted to communicate with him. The guy understood that both he and Miko were interested in the public, but he also understood that Alex hardly realized who he really was. Menos realized that this event was not from the game's storyline. It was a decision made by Alex herself, and this brings out a new twist in the storyline. This is the kind of something he expected from the main character of this story. Plus, it might dispel his boredom and have a bit of fun. But the Elf Queen advised Menos and Miko to decline this invitation, as Alexandra was the new empress who had saved the empire from the Prince of Darkness. But at the same time, she had serious questions for her as the new ruler of that same empire. Now, Noah's empire has a lot of internal problems. The empress can't control her subordinates. Besides, almost every day she is attacked by mercenaries to kill, so the queen didn't want to let her daughter go to such a lousy place. Menos realized that they shouldn't be afraid of assassins at all, but the fact that Alex wanted to kill wasn't a rumor either. But Mikarin decided to oppose her mother. She was going to accept the invitation. After all, it was just a matter of conversation. Besides, it was an opportunity to improve relations between the countries. At that moment, Menos decided to give some explanations about Alex. So she's obsessed with kindness and justice, so there's no need to expect meanness from her. Plus, he'll accept the invitation too. Mikarin looked at her mother with big eyes, saying that she too wanted to benefit the fairy kingdom and asked her mother to allow her to do so. The queen at this time realized that before she knew it, her daughter was grown up, so she let her go for the sake of their shared country. The queen asked Menos to keep an eye on her naive, sweet, and too kind daughter, to keep her from falling into the hands of bad people. And Miko already ran to pack her things for a trip to the Noah Empire. Primo and Euphil ran up to them in the hallway. The girl asked the Lord if it was true that they were going to the Empire. He said it was, but Euphil was against it. Eulil did not stop. He looked very scary at this moment, because he hates the inferior people who took away his lord's throne, and now had the nerve to invite him to visit. He wanted to squeeze all the juices out of them. But they still go to the capital of the Noah Empire, and yes, it will be difficult for them not to stand out. Besides, now Menos could not foresee the future course of history, but in any case, he needs to move on. Menos said it was necessary to keep an eye on the silly Mikarin, and Primo added that she wasn't thrilled with the idea, but if the Lord was sure it would be a fun adventure, she supported him. So Miko packed a million things into her backpack, which made it seem to him that she was not going to visit, but to run away from home. He was light, and set out on the road with Menos. The girl was calculating how many days they would have to spend on the road. She figured 7 to 10, but Menos only had plans for 3. Mikarin didn't believe it, as the horses couldn't pull the carriage that fast. But Menos pointed to Glasha, saying that they would ride on her. If they went like normal people, he would die of boredom on the way. It was better to fly into the territory of the Noah Empire with a breeze, but Miko wanted to go slowly, so Menos yelled at her, said that the flight was in 40 minutes, so she was leaving half of her things here. To the boy prince, Menos gave Menos to warn the people in the empire that he would be the first to arrive, and it was best to do it now. For he and Mikarin would eat on Glasha, who at this moment assumed her true form, and the boy and girl sat on her back, and now they were in the sky and flying. Miko was crying, the messenger looked shocked, and the queen waved goodbye. Sitting on Glasha, Miko was indignant, and asked the guy if he could act less like a fucked up person. And after all, he could have warned her that they would be flying and she wouldn't have packed so much stuff. They were both in a hurry to get to the capital, but their reasons were different. Menos admitted that he wanted to get to the capital as soon as possible, as he realized that Alex was not only behaving according to the plot of the game, but Miko was interested in the stores and other places from the guide to the capital city. He had thought for a moment that she was just like him, though it was unlikely. Plus, he had an interesting future ending to the story. They flew at high speed south from the fairy kingdom, through the forest of ogres and through the city of Ashi, south to the Noah Empire. And the final point of their journey is the capital of the Noah Empire, the city of Gopher, whose size is staggering. This is Minos' hometown, the one he left never to return here. And he had to return too quickly. No oddities in the city could be seen from the sky, though perhaps they had arrived too quickly. He thanked Glasha for her speed and sent her off to rest in the shade of the trees. Miko was enthralled by the sight of the empire and its capital city. For Miko, it was a first-time experience. At this point, Miko began to guess that Menos was far from the first time in the city, but he decided not to reveal the truth to her, and the guy snatched her guidebook with notes and began to study her notes. Especially, he liked the one about the pancake entry. It was mostly entries about all sorts of delicious things that Miko wanted to be sure to try. Then the guards came running in, mistaking them for adventurers. They were mistaken for bad people who were up to no good against their empress. He didn't want them to be spotted, but it came out that way. So he wanted to try and explain things to the soldiers. But he was interrupted by Miko, stating that she was the daughter of the elven queen, Mikorin, and they had been invited to the capital by Empress Alexandra and were going straight to the palace, and ordered the guards to the invitation letter and asked to be let through. Menos realized that this she had done in vain, and indeed the guards were beginning to attract the attention of passers-by by thanking the girl too loudly. They decided to escort her to the palace as she was probably tired of the carriage ride, but she wanted to walk around the city first. But that didn't work out so well either, as the guards decided to show her around the capital themselves. And Menos, under the noise, decided to run away and go for a walk in the city without unnecessary spies. Besides, he was not going to meet Empress Alex to go with Miko. But he said that the girl should not worry about this meeting. Besides, her level had risen to 20th after defeating the dragon, so she'd kill anyone in this city, even the Empress, if something went wrong. So there was no threat to her life, but she wanted him to go with her. But he replied that it was too troublesome and left, putting on his black hood, and while everyone is watching Miko, he decided to leave town. And then, while passing by one of the stands, Menos heard some guy yelling about how it was time to destroy the 7 demon kings. And that would be possible if Alex made an alliance with Mikorin. Watching this representative of the army of heroes who wanted to defeat the demon kings and call the townspeople to action, Menos realized that Alexandra had a huge problem with controlling her subordinates. The protagonist, hiding in the hood and watching what is happening around him, suddenly thought about it. What if his girlfriend is not enough level, and accordingly she does not have the necessary skills? He could also clearly see that the people in the capital became much happier under her rule, as Alex genuinely loved her people. Now Menos realized that he had taken the wrong position from the beginning, and he could not be compared to someone who had become empress because of the interests of the people rather than his own. And he could not be a champion of justice from the beginning. Now, unexpectedly, the guy came to one of the alleys of the city. Before he had become the demon emperor, he had often escaped from the palace, and so he used the alley to get to his secret hiding place, where he played various games. Every day in that place was spent with Primo, Eufir, Fiore, and someone else, and was very happy and joyful. And so he took a step into the alley again, walked leisurely to the end point and saw Alex there. Menos looked at her and began to understand why he was always drawn to her. The protagonist had many assumptions, both that she was the protagonist of the game and that she was his opposite. But now he recognized her. She was the one who had reached out to him that very day and smiled at him. She was also the one who died in his arms when the bandits attacked him. Now the guy and the girl were staring intently into each other's eyes. Alex didn't understand who was standing in front of her, and he realized that their story started 10 years ago. In the past, when Menos had lived in the palace, he had often spent time in the palace library, and one day he went there again and found on the topmost shelf the book he needed to study. Behind a rack of books, the maids were talking about how the boy had once again escaped from his room. They were sure that he was going to create new monsters, and they were afraid to live near him, and rumors about him had begun to spread among the soldiers. And then one of the maids told the others that it was Menos who was mentioned in the prophecy, that he was the messenger of the cataclysm. At that very moment, the boy came out of his hiding place and stared at the servants. It was not the first time the boy had heard such a thing, but it offended him very much. So he told the maids with a sad look that he had taken the book he wanted and was going back to his room. This situation once again showed the real faces of the people who lived in the castle. As to his face, they called him Prince and fawned over him, while behind his back they discussed his skill and disgusting element. Manos walked into the hall of paintings and stopped beside one of the portraits. He recalled the words of the servants, for he remembered them well. They had all called him a heretic who had tainted the lineage of heroes with his birth. The protagonist was so intent and staring at a portrait of one of his ancestors that he didn't notice that another person had appeared in the room and hit him with all his might. Strangely enough, the blow the boy received was from his own father, who towered over him with a menacing look and asked him what he had forgotten in such a sacred place. The man was furious when his son called him father. He thought he had no right to do so and hit his staff on the head again, saying that only worthy family members could enter this room, but not him. Manos glared at his father. This made him even more angry, and he told him to stop looking at him with such eyes, as he considered his son a disgrace to the empire. At that moment, the emperor's secretary entered the room and called out to him. A servant informed Emperor Merk that the king of Rodnith had arrived and was waiting to see him. The man stopped beating the child and ordered him locked in a room. The king went to meet him, but added that a servant should lock the door of Manos's room with 3 locks from the outside, so that he would not have even a chance of getting out of there while there were important guests in the castle. The emperor looked back at his son and said that if he ever tried to escape from the room again, he wouldn't get off that easy. The guards approached Manos and began to lift him off the floor to do the emperor's bidding. The boy was glad that the book had not been taken from him, and everything else no longer surprised him. The prince was used to the fact that everyone in the castle hated him and wanted him gone, even the closest people, relatives and parents. Manos passed by the window. He looked through it and realized clearly that this castle was not his home, but his prison. The boy found himself in his room, and the maids happily put locks on the door, asking him to be an obedient child, to obey Emperor Merk, and not to leave this room. Manos was silent. At that moment, Primo and Eufir jumped out of the toy box and hugged him. He realized that the monsters were worried because he'd been gone so long, so he tried to calm them down. The monsters noticed a mark on their master's cheek, but he said there was nothing wrong with it and asked them to forget about it. The protagonist knew that his little friends were kind creatures, unlike the humans in this castle. The boy didn't like being labeled a disaster, so he made the decision to become the strongest and kindest emperor in the history of the country. The monsters were happy with his decision. Manos himself decided that to achieve the desired result, he needed to make more friends. So he began to study the book he had brought. Manos said he could only create monsters he had seen before, but now he was interested in seeing if he could create a monster from a book. So he chose a monster that could be a good ally for them to be like the heroes. The young man was very happy because he had succeeded. The young man was madly happy, for he had succeeded. The kid picked up the monster in his arms and said that this little guy turned out very strong, and gave him the name Fiora. Manos said they would be comrades from this day forward. The monster began to chortle contentedly, since they had become friends. So the boy took the monster to the window and showed the huge number of soldiers below, and asked him to help him with the invisibility skill. Fiora happily agreed. After receiving his consent, Manos tossed Fiora. She landed on her feet and shrieked happily in the circle of soldiers. The prince realized from the guard's reaction that Fiora's skill had worked, so he climbed out the window with the other monsters and moved on to his mini-adventure outside the palace. The boy was happy. He praised his unusual friends and said that in the future they would be the best group of heroes ever. Then he stopped, turned around, and looked at his castle. He realized that such things should not upset him, for he planned to become a great hero of this country. And so he and his team came into the city. He ordered his comrades to start patrolling the city with him and look for those in trouble to help them. Manos searched every corner, and from one of the alleys he heard soft crying and sobbing. He went there and saw a girl crying. The prince decided to ask her who she was, where and how she came from, where her parents were, and if she was lost. The girl did not answer him and only continued to cry. He could tell from her reaction that she probably just didn't want to go home because something bad had happened there. Manos remembered himself and how he was locked up in his room. So he leaned over to her and told her that he was just like her and invited her to come with him. And since they are friends in misfortune, the boy says they have every reason and right not to go home. But first, they must leave this dark back alley, for here his senses are dulled. Menos smiled sincerely at his new acquaintance and held out his hand, beckoning her to come with him. She even stopped crying. She went with him. Now Menos wondered whether they would have remained unhappy children if he had not reached out to her that day, or whether things would have turned out differently. But he held out his hand to her, and she grasped it, and the boy led her to his secret place. It was very beautiful there, and she stopped crying, and then she told him her name. That was the beginning of their story, his tragic becoming the Emperor of Darkness, Menos Noah. And Alex played no small part in that. Hearing the name of an acquaintance, he decided to introduce himself as well, but then hesitated as he had no idea how she would react to who he really was. So, as strange as it may sound, he called himself Maya so she wouldn't realize who he was. Menos proudly informed the girl that this was his secret base, and this was where he did his secret training with his friends on becoming a real hero. At that moment, all of his little monster friends jumped on the boy. He began to beg their forgiveness for leaving them in that scary alley. Meanwhile, Fiora was already standing in front of Alex and staring at her intently. The girl didn't know how to react, but the boy assured her that although they were monsters, they were very kind and good. Nevertheless, Alex was not frightened. She said that Fiora was very cute. Her words touched Minos, since no one had ever called his friends cute except him. Though a little confused, he tried to explain to his new acquaintance that all these little ones were his very close friends and important to him. But since the girl is now an important person to him as well, he offered her to be a part of his heroic journey and heroic training. Menos opened the book and started showing Alex the place where Noah's empire was founded. It turned out that there used to be a lot of monsters in that place, but his ancestor destroyed them all and founded a city there, safe for people. The boy realized that for now he was very weak, but believed that one day he would become equal, if not stronger than Mephis, as well as kind and help people. That was his dream. Alex looked at him admiringly but didn't say a word. And the boy went on and said that he practiced here every day with the sword to achieve this goal. The only thing that upset the guy was that there were only stumps around and no sparring partners. He asked the monsters not to worry, as it wasn't their fault that they couldn't help him learn fencing. Watching the boy and his friends, Alex decided to help him and pulled out one of the training swords, thus telling him that she would be helping him train. This idea pleased Menos very much. He told the girl that they would start with the basics, so he would make the first strokes light so that she would get used to it. What was interesting was that the girl was able to block all of his attacks, which made Menos curious. So he asked her if this was really her first time holding a sword and decided to try harder combinations. And here he was showing her some new moves with the sword. He realized that for beginners it could seem very complicated, and most likely she would not be able to repeat it. But he was wrong. Alex easily repeated the whole combination of his moves from the first time. Seeing this, the boy realized that Alex was a brilliant swordsman, so he got excited and said he wouldn't give in to her swordsmanship. It was amazing. It was the first time Menos practiced with such pleasure, as he had to reach for the girl, and they repeated and practiced all the new combinations. Menos was tired and lay down on the grass. Alex crouched next to him. He told her that it was much more interesting to train when there was someone to do it with, so he thanked her for the company. The girl admitted that she had a lot of fun too. But the boy, in spite of her joy, was concerned as to why she had been crying when they met. So he asked her about it, clarifying if something serious had happened at home. Alex admitted that she had some special skill, so the people at home were very hard on her because they want her to learn how to use that skill, but she wasn't good at it, so they called her untalented. It was for this reason that she ran away from home, as she was useless and could not bear to hear reproaches against her. The girl didn't realize if people would be kinder to her if she didn't have this skill. But Menos told her to stop thinking about it, because there was nothing wrong with her. He believed that she didn't choose to be born the way she was, and she'd gotten her skill at birth, so why should she blame herself for not being able to use it or change it? It was wrong in his opinion. Menos didn't understand why they deserved such an attitude from the people around them, and they called the girl talentless on top of everything else. And of all of them, it was the people who were the villains, not them. He promised to protect the girl if someone hurt her again. Alex didn't understand why he decided to act like that for someone like her. It made the boy jump up and say that from now on she was their precious comrade. Alex thanked him for this attitude, but the boy noticed that the sun was beginning to set, and he needed to get home before dark. It was time for the girl to go back too, and the moment it was necessary to say goodbye, they spoke at the same time, which caused a wave of embarrassment in them. After a pause, Manos was the first to speak. He asked the girl if she wanted to come here tomorrow and practice with him, but then he added that he would understand if she refused. But the thing was, Alex wanted to offer him the same thing, so they agreed to meet at this place tomorrow. The girl returned to the castle, but she couldn't get into the room unnoticed, so her fencing teacher intercepted her and asked her why she had missed class. The teacher reminded the girl not to neglect her duties because of a personal whim. He reminded her that there were many people relying on her, so she needed to awaken her skill as soon as possible. At that moment, the queen entered the room. She asked her daughter's mentor to stop pushing her so hard, as her girl should have time to rest. The man wanted to object, but the woman didn't listen to him and took her daughter to her room. Alex, though sad, wanted to tell her mother that she had made a friend. The queen didn't listen to her and continued her speech that she understood her perfectly well, especially that she was tired of training every day, and it was the first time she had come to Noah's empire, so today she had the right to rest. Then she added something that disappointed the girl. She said that since Alex had rested today, she would have to do even better at practice tomorrow. The woman added that Alex was Road Knight's future support, which was why she had to go through rigorous training. She also believed that the girl would sooner or later awaken the power of the Lord of the Roses. And then she hugged her daughter and told her that she too would try very hard for this goal. Meanwhile, the two emperors signed an important document for both states. A representative of the Holy Church took the document in his hands and began to read what was written there. It was a treaty between the two kingdoms that concerned Princess Alexandra and Prince Manos, and it was the minister of the church who confirmed and witnessed the conclusion of the engagement between them. At that moment, Manos returned to his room through the window. He realized that a little longer and he would not have made it. There was a knock at the door and a maid entered, bringing him his supper and praising him for not leaving his room. The boy tried to eat, but the food was cold and unpalatable, so he decided to go straight to bed. Manos hugged his monsters and admitted to them that today was the first time he'd ever had so much fun playing with someone. But he was worried that if the girl found out who he really was, she might hate him. But it was time for bed, and both children fell asleep thinking that a new day would come sooner. A new day came, and the boy snuck out the window again and escaped from the castle. He came to his secret place, but noticed that Alex hadn't arrived yet, but he still thought it was going to be a great day. He sat down on the grass and waited. For a moment, he thought he had come too soon, and the girl couldn't have forgotten their promise. And if she was late, she had a good reason. At that moment, the thought crossed his mind that she had found out he was Menos Noah, so she had decided not to see him again. Suddenly, a panting Alex came running into the shelter. She apologized for being late and asked the boy how long he had been waiting. Menos was happy, so without hesitation, he said that he had come here himself recently and had not been waiting for her long at all. A whole week passed at this pace. They spent every day together. The girl made him a promise to come the next day and kept it every time. They patrolled the streets, practiced fencing, walked together, and so on every day. And it seemed to the boy that this joyful time would last forever. But different moments happened, and at one of these, Menos noticed a strange man walking not far from them, so the boy suggested that the girl take a different road than the main one. It was one of the castle's employees, so Menos realized that they shouldn't cross paths, as otherwise an uproar would be raised, and then Alex would find out who he really was. The boy believed that if the girl found out the truth about him, she would never want to spend time with him again, as she would hate him. So he wanted to hide and wait out the danger. He was afraid he would be alone again, like the days when he was locked in his room, so he had no choice but to hide the truth. The maid had told Menos that his father had recently found a bride for him, and that an engagement had recently been concluded between the two heads of state. The boy did not want to know the details, for his opinion was of no interest to anyone. Menos didn't want to know the bride's name, because as long as his happy time with Alex lasted, everything else didn't matter to him. After all, The time spent with her was the most important and brightest time of his life, so he needed nothing more than her friendship. Meanwhile, the children's fathers were ending the meeting. Emperor MANHWA said that he was happy to have such a fruitful cooperation with King Road Knight. The opponent was also happy and asked to drop the formalities. The King of Rudnith considered his family lucky, as Menos Noah had chosen his daughter as his wife, and they would soon be related to the current emperor. Emperor Merk thought that the beautiful daughter of the Road Knight family was the best thing that could have happened to his wayward son, which pleased the future relative. The men said goodbye. The King of Rodnith suggested that they bring their children to the next meeting to meet them. Afterward, they parted ways. Merk's aide noted that the negotiations were successful. The aide was sure that when Menos knew who would become his wife, he would be happy, as the princess was beautiful, and it was being done for him in a way. The emperor interrupted him and asked what he was talking about. The emperor looked at his aide and asked him if he thought he was doing all this out of love for this child, or if he thought of him as his son. It was not so. The boy was only a tool for him to achieve his goal. The man added that the King of Rodnith had no idea that the boy was an impure creature, as he had kept him locked up all these years. And this engagement was just a formality. This was so that he, Merk Noah, could take over the Road Knight kingdom from within without putting much effort into it. The aide did not understand how his ruler could act so meanly, but he replied that it was not his problem, and the king of the neighboring kingdom was himself to blame, as he wanted to sign a favorable contract for himself and did not notice what lay on the surface. Emperor Merk, on the other hand, had no intention of ever ceding his throne, which he felt could and should be his alone. At that moment, a priest appeared in the hall. He assured the emperor that after signing the engagement documents, his position and status had been strengthened and made even higher. The man agreed with him and asked if he could continue to occupy his throne unproblematically. The old man replied that the emperor would rule for a long time and prosper. The priest claimed that if the emperor would do as the oracle said, all would be well. At this point, the man looked like a madman, as he wanted to get rid of anyone who would get in his way and encroach on his throne. The aide was just now beginning to realize what was going on, and it really hit him hard. Meanwhile, Menos, Alex, and the monsters were tracking down people who needed help. They saw a peasant who had a torn basket, but the boy and Eufel were able to fix it remotely. That was all well and good, but the girl did not understand why they had to hide, for they were doing good things. But the boy said they needed to practice stealth. Menos said that they were hiding because they could have been attacked by bad people. Alex, on the other hand, thought it was because they had monsters with them. Alex took it to mean that if it was a secret and he didn't want to tell her, she wouldn't insist, because she understood. Nevertheless, she asked the boy to tell her everything, even if it was about his problems, because she would feel better in her heart if he was okay. Menos sighed heavily and asked Alex if she knew why many people hated darkness element magic. The girl didn't understand where he was going, but the boy continued and said that this element was the closest to monsters. Alex nodded her head in agreement. And then he began to cast magic. He pointed his hand at the monsters and said that he created all of them, and his skill is called Monster Maker. People hate him when they find out, and even his father doesn't think he's human. For this reason, O hides it, and his parents keep him locked up in a castle. And then he insisted on his real name, Menos Noah. He realized that in any eventuality, he was the most hated man in the Noah Empire. Suddenly, the boy noticed and asked Alex if she was not afraid of him. She went up to him and said she was not afraid of him. Alex looked into his eyes and told him that she knew perfectly well that he was a kind and good man. Better than many. Menos was scared and lowered his head, asking Alex if they couldn't be friends now. But the girl took his hands in hers and said that she was not going to leave him. In that minute, Alex was sure they would be friends forever. This made Menos very happy and touched. He wiped his tears with his hand, smiled, and thanked the girl for it. But then something strange began to happen. There were explosions, smoke, and noise. Menos asked the girl not to let go of his hand, for he did not understand what was happening. But Alex couldn't hold his hand, and the girl was snatched up by someone and pulled to the side. But the smoke made it hard to see who did it. Oddly enough, these were her mother's personal knights, who was worried when the girl ran away from the castle, so she sent them to find her and bring her back. The knights ran forward. They were going to report to the queen that the princess was secretly meeting with MANHWA, who possessed the element of darkness. She screamed and called out to him, but all he could do was look in the direction from which her voice was heard. After a while, the queen's guards brought the girl back to the castle. Her mother and father worriedly began to hug her, as they were very worried. The king was outraged, for he could not think that his daughter would dare to escape from the palace. Meanwhile, the knights told him what they had seen in the alley. The young men claimed that Prince Menos was trying to harm the princess by using black magic, but the girl screamed, as it was not true. The girl didn't deny that Menos possessed black magic, but he didn't harm her in any way, for he was her closest and best friend. So she asked her father and mother not to worry about it, as her friend was a very good person. The King of Rhodnite ordered the knights to lock his daughter in her room and guard the exit, preventing her from getting out of there, while he himself decided to gather his men and advance to the imperial palace. The king tried to prove to Alex that Menos was a bad person and befriend her, since he possessed black magic and therefore just stupefied her. So he said he would bring a magician who would dispel the spell, but in the meantime, she was not to leave the room. The man apologized to his daughter since it all happened because of him, but nevertheless, he wouldn't listen to her and told her that she needed to forget Prince Menos. The girl cried bitterly, but her parents paid no attention to it. The queen thought that all this happened because of her carelessness. The man thought that his gullibility was to blame. Nevertheless, he was going to find Alex a new groom as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Emperor Merk Noah was making grandiose plans that the lands of Rhodnite would soon be his, and there he could cross the Etheric Sea and conquer the countries on the other side. The emperor's musings were interrupted by the secretary, who burst in without knocking and risked his life. But the guy said it was very important, and then he was pushed aside by the King of Rhodnate, who entered the office. Such insolence of the man did not please the emperor, and he offered to meet on all matters of their treaty tomorrow. But the King of Rhodnate asked him directly if he wanted to tell him about his son's magical abilities. Merk tried to let dust in his eyes, saying that all his family members had only had light magic for centuries, and Menos was no exception, and everything else was just silly rumors. But the guest already knew the truth that Prince Menos possessed darkness magic, so he believed that he wanted to harm his daughter in this way. This was a surprise to the emperor. King Rhodnith wondered if the emperor even wanted to make peace, for he was certain that the prince had manipulated his daughter deliberately to destroy his kingdom. Merk, on the other hand, did not understand his opponent's actions, since the engagement between their children was already concluded and confirmed by the Holy Church. Besides, if the King of Rhodnith breaks their treaty now, he will lose the trust of the Holy Church and other countries. But if he binds their countries with this alliance, he will gain more benefits than he thinks. But the king was not going to marry his daughter to a monster for the sake of his country's well-being. He believed that Merk would no longer be able to hide the truth, and he had the right to choose darkness, but Rhodnite would always be on the side of light. So he broke the engagement between their children right here and now. The man was about to leave, but he was really sorry they couldn't find common ground. This situation pissed Merk off. He walked down the corridor in a rage, shouting about where to find his vile son. The emperor burst into his room. The servants were surprised and frightened, but said that the prince had not left his room. Merk struck the guy with his staff, but it wasn't him. It was a fake, a slug in his guise. The servants didn't understand how it happened, but were punished for the omission immediately. The emperor ran to the seer. He shouted that he had promised him something completely different, to which the elder replied that the future is unpredictable and can change, and now he was seeing a completely different prophecy. The seer said that Menos would be the beginning of a catastrophe, which would be a great evil in the future that would bring woe to the whole world. The emperor was angry as he had kept his son alive, the belief being that he would bring prosperity to the empire. The old man looked at the ruler and said that he had not misheard a word then. It was all done for this day, for a new future. When the evil is defeated, all the countries of the world will worship Merk and will not be able to challenge him, and the kingdom of Rhodnite will fall at his feet. So using it, he will be able to surpass the first hero from Noah's lineage. Then the elder calmed down and said that this is what he saw in the prophecy. The emperor also liked the new prophecy. Emperor Merk thought that such events could not affect him in any way, for his throne and power were unshakable, so he decided to summon the soldiers. He ordered his soldiers to find Menos at any cost and bring him to him. The man was mad. He wanted his son back in any form, even with his limbs cut off, but alive, so that he could deal with him in his own way. As the emperor was leaving the palace, a girl looked out from behind the storga and addressed the priest. Lafrise looked at her mentor and talked about how she had not received any new prediction for the emperor. Mr. Nefiro told her that sometimes it is the task of the church to tell a person what they want to hear. Mr. Nefiro looked out the window and thought about the fact that one day he would be the ruler of a new world when the two kingdoms were weakened because of the feud. So he told the girl to be careful of Menos, as he had become unnecessary to them. To carry out his plan, he used his hearing manipulation skill on one of the guards, for he needed Menos to be brought to him. He also ordered the soldier to kill anyone who prevented him from doing so. The soldier went to his colleagues and gave them the order. Meanwhile, Queen Road Knight's servants informed her that the soldiers and servants of the castle were acting very strange. They looked devastated and kept repeating about how they needed to bring Menos here. The queen said they had better not get involved in something they had no clue about, so they needed to wait for the king to return for further action. At that moment, Alex realized the boy was in danger, so she opened the window, ready to jump out to warn him. But the problem was that her window and room was on the 3rd floor, and she was very scared to jump. Meanwhile, Menos was running the streets of the city with the monsters and trying to find Alex, calling her name loudly. The boy saw that it was starting to get dark, which meant that he had to go home already, but he wanted to find his friend. However, he did not understand how he could find her, because there were a lot of people in town today. Under these circumstances, he didn't know how he was going to find the girl. A soldier and 2 other men appeared behind him. They began to stretch their hands toward Menos and repeat the orders whispered by the priest. And then Fiora rushed to the boy's aid. She created a kind of dome, which drove people away, and the boy began to run away from them. Menos ran. He didn't understand what was happening. It was understandable if soldiers were after him, but there were regular servants here, and everyone was acting very strangely. Fiora shielded the boy once more. Now she fell unconscious, and Menos realized she had used all her mana. The boy blamed himself for the fact that his friend was now ill. And meanwhile, the zombified soldiers and servants were approaching him. Menos hid in one alley, and the servants from the castle walked around like zombies looking for him. Alex came to his rescue at that moment. She told people to look for him in the other direction and apologized to him for being a little late. The girl held out her hand to him and told him that they needed to find a better place, as they would be found very quickly in this one. Menos was happy to see her. And then he noticed that she had abrasions on her face. He thought about it being done by the people who dragged her away. But it wasn't. She got them when she jumped out of the window. The girl said it didn't matter, as the main thing now was to help him and the monsters. Menos thought about the fact that it was probably his father who had sent all these people to find him. The boy realized that his father had found out about his escape from the castle, so now he was very angry. Alex didn't understand why he had sent so many people to search for him. Menos gave the girl to Fiora and asked her to get the little ones out of here, as the emperor only wanted him, and if they stayed near him, they would be in danger too. He knew full well that his father hated him, so he had no idea what he would do to him. Afterward, he thanked the girl for coming to save him. He was very happy about that. But to save the monsters, he asked Alex to take them away. But the monsters pounced on the boy, and Alex started to explain to him why they were so angry. The thing is, they love him. But the boy was very much worried about them and didn't want to get involved in all this. Then the girl sat down next to him and said that he had promised her and the monsters that they would all be heroes together, hadn't he? Alex reminded him that all members of the group should protect and help each other, so they all wanted to protect the boy. Menos realized that they couldn't run forever, and he didn't know what to do. The girl made a decision and offered her friend to run away together as far as time and strength would allow. Alex smiled and said they needed to escape to a place where no one knew them so they could live in peace. And in that city, they will definitely have to join the Guild of Adventurers, and then they can become real heroes and save the world. And there will be adventures waiting for them. Menos stopped abruptly. He wasn't sure that they would succeed. Alex was sure that with their joint efforts, they would succeed. At that moment, the boy realized that it sounded very funny, for he had never imagined his life outside the walls of his room. They had almost made it to the gate, and the boy suddenly thought about how they could make it work. But at that moment, the soldiers caught up with them and started to pull their hands towards the boy. But Alex covered him with her own. But it didn't help as the soldiers were zombified, so they killed the girl by stabbing her with a sword. Alex fell to the ground. The soldiers surrounded them, as they only cared about capturing Menos, and everything else didn't matter. The soldiers repeated like a mantra to catch Menos, but the boy started to defend his monsters, but they were all impaled with swords. The boy knelt down and began to cry. Menos felt strongly. He realized he had no right to be weak. The boy cried bitterly as all his friends were dead. But he realized that he should have done it sooner, and he activated his synthesis skill. And so the boy was gripped by tongues of dark magic. Something changed inside the boy, and he began to change outwardly. And then he apologized to Alex. And then wings made of pure darkness appeared behind his back. But that was only the beginning of the transformation. Menos was no longer human at all. Now he was a true demon. Menos now began to realize that this was the end and could never be a real hero. Now everything had changed. Menos realized that he didn't like being beaten, didn't like being locked in a room alone. The soldiers' faces changed as they couldn't understand what was happening to the boy. He realized more and more clearly that he hated it when someone hurt the people he cared about. Menos realized that he couldn't protect anything or anyone before, so he hated his weakness more than anything. The boy carried Alex in his arms to the castle, where his father was already waiting for him, who was glad that his son had shown his true nature and started attacking him. The emperor attacked the kid without stopping, as he became useless to him. But it turned out that all the ropes he had bound the kid with had disappeared somewhere. Merc didn't understand how this was possible, because the blood of the first heroes of the empire flowed in his veins. Menos continued to block and repel his father's attacks. The man couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed to him that he couldn't lose to such a monster as his own son was. One of the emperor's main mistakes was that he was worried about the wrong things during the battle. He was worried about his throne and thought that it belonged only to him. Menos couldn't stand it. He didn't understand how innocent people could be killed for the sake of power and a chair. The boy started to lose control. His father had already fallen to the floor, but Menos rushed to attack. He blamed his father for Alex and the monsters dying because of him. At first, the emperor was frightened, but then he smiled and said that the day would come when his son would understand all his actions and deeds. And now with a smile, he accepted death at the hand of his offspring. And after that, all the servants and soldiers entered the throne room. They started falling on their knees and begged for forgiveness and mercy for disrespecting the heir. Menos now looked at all the people who had bowed their heads before him and was disgusted at how quickly they had changed their minds. He realized that his father and all these people had tormented him for too long. Menos now realized that by gaining power, he had gained power. Since people become afraid of those who have power, and if someone is afraid of someone, he bows his head to the strong. Unfortunately, he realized this truth too late, so the outcome was sad. He took Alex in his arms and apologized for making her wait so long. So he used his skill and summoned Lilith, the queen of the underworld. The monster looked at Menos and asked him if he was the one who created it. But the question was what for. Menos realized that he had become stronger, which meant that he would be able to create high-level monsters. So he did. Since he was Lilith's master, he asked to resurrect Alex with his skill. But in order to do that, she needed to pull the girl's soul out of the underworld. But that was the problem, since the human soul was too fragile, and when it was pulled out of the underworld, some of its contents could be lost. It meant the girl would lose her memory. Menos was concerned about the length of time she would forget. Lilith said it was different for each person, depending on the strength of the soul, but most likely the last few months. The boy couldn't make up his mind, but then he gathered his strength and ordered Lilith to begin the resurrection process. Menos realized that Alex would forget the time they had spent together, but still, he couldn't do otherwise. And then he took the girl to their secret place. He knew someone would find her soon. Menos looked around one last time. He admitted that he really wanted their happy days together in this place to last forever. But it didn't happen. They wouldn't be heroes. But still, he was glad they were friends. But he had to go. And then Menos left. Alex, on the other hand, stayed in their hideout. Soon the girl was found by Road Knight soldiers and the queen, who exhaled when she saw her daughter alive. Alex was crying bitterly as she realized that someone had saved her life. But she couldn't remember who it was, even though she realized that this person was important and special to her. The girl was crying and could not calm down. Menos thought that even if she forgot everything that bound them together, he and she would be all right. To top it all off, Menos knew that he could only get stronger when he was alone, so he used fusion many times. When he was done with that, he asked Lilith to resurrect his first monsters. When she did, he asked them how they felt. He looked at them intently and asked them to listen to him carefully, for from this day forward, they were coming under his command. Menos made a promise to himself that he would never lose anyone else. He would make everyone afraid of himself to protect those he cared about.